My mother waited until every table had gone quiet before she raised her champagne glass. I remember that detail because she could have made her toast while people were still talking, while servers were moving between tables, while the band was resetting for the next song. She did not. She stood beside my father and waited until almost 160 people were looking at her. Then she smiled at my younger sister and said, "Let's be honest. Her sister would have made the better bride." A few people gave the nervous little laughs people make when they are waiting to find out whether something is a joke. My father nodded as though Mom had just stated a fact everyone in the room had been too polite to admit. "Everyone knows it," he said. My fingers tightened around Nathan's hand under the table. I looked across the ballroom at Grace, our wedding planner. "Bring out the other dress." Ashley's head snapped toward Mom. Dad lowered his glass so quickly that champagne sloshed over his fingers. Grace disappeared through the service doors and came back carrying a sealed white garment bag. The tag hanging from the zipper had my sister's name printed across it in black letters, Ashley Ellis. If you're listening to this, I hope your day is going better than that particular minute of mine did. Stay with me, because the dress was only the first thing that came out that night, and what my parents had arranged behind my back went much further than one cruel wedding toast. And if you enjoy stories about families who finally have to face the consequences of what they do, subscribe to the channel and stay with me, because this one took me a long time to understand even after it was over. 6 weeks earlier, I had no idea there would ever be another wedding dress inside the hotel where I was supposed to marry Nathan. At that point, my biggest concern was whether our florist could get the suspended greenery installed without the hotel charging another labor block. I was 38, I worked as a procurement director for a hospitality company in Portland, and details were what I did for a living. Contracts, vendors, delivery windows, penalties, change orders. If something had a deadline and a price attached to it, I wanted to know who was responsible for it and what happened if they failed. Nathan used to tease me that I could turn ordering dinner into a competitive bidding process. He was only half joking. Our wedding was expensive, but not because either of us was trying to impress people. We were inviting a large family, a lot of friends, and several coworkers who had become important to us over the years. The hotel was beautiful, the food was good, and the ballroom needed less decoration than most places we had toured. Even so, once the rentals, flowers, lighting, photography, music, dinner, and all the other pieces were added together, we were spending just under $80,000. Nathan and I were paying for it ourselves. We had saved for it, budgeted for it, and rejected several upgrades we could technically afford because neither of us wanted to begin our marriage by turning one Saturday into a financial hangover. Paying for it ourselves was also a boundary. I did not announce it that way to my parents, but that was what it was. Mom had strong opinions about everything from the invitations to the number of candles on the tables. Dad had a quieter way of inserting himself. He would ask questions that sounded practical, until I realized the question already contained the answer he wanted. Nathan and I decided early that if we paid the bills and signed the contracts, decisions would stay with us. I thought that was enough protection. Looking back, that was my first mistake. I understood contracts better than I understood how far my parents were willing to go around one. Ashley's call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at work. I almost ignored it because I was standing outside a conference room waiting for a supplier meeting. But she called twice in less than a minute. When I answered, she was crying hard enough that I could barely understand her. Her wedding venue had shut its doors that morning. The owner had been dealing with financial problems for months, apparently, and whatever final arrangement they had been trying to make had failed. Ashley and Ethan had put down about $12,000, and nobody could tell them when or whether they would get it back. My first reaction was sympathy. Whatever else was complicated between my sister and me, losing a wedding venue after months of planning was awful. Ashley had been talking about that place for nearly a year. It was an old converted mill outside Portland, with exposed brick, huge windows, and a courtyard she had already imagined in every possible photograph. I stepped away from the conference room and asked whether she and Ethan had somewhere they could meet with the venue representatives, whether they had copies of their payment records, and whether they had contacted their credit card company about any charges that might still be disputable. She gave me a broken laugh and said, You always go straight to paperwork. That's because paperwork is where people suddenly remember what they promised you, I said. I told her I would send her the names of 2 smaller venues I knew through work and a contact at a hotel group that sometimes had cancellations. I did not offer money. I did not offer my venue. I did not offer to fix the entire wedding. Ashley did not ask me to. Moan did. She called that evening while Nathan and I were eating takeout at our kitchen counter. She spent the first 10 minutes telling me how devastated Ashley was, how Ethan was trying to be strong, how unfair it was that this had happened to them after everything they had already planned. I agreed with all of that. Then Mom's tone changed in that subtle way I had known since childhood. She stopped talking about what had happened and started talking about what we could do. Everyone will already be in town for you, she said. Your relatives, Nathan's family, a lot of the cousins, people are staying at the hotel through Sunday anyway. I put my fork down. Okay, what if Ashley and Ethan did something small Sunday morning? I looked at Nathan. He had heard enough from my side of the conversation to know where this was going, and he slowly stopped chewing. If they want to book something Sunday, they should ask Grace what the hotel has available, I said. I can send Ashley her number. Mom brightened immediately. Exactly. See? This is what I mean. It could be simple. Intimate. The room is already beautiful. The hotel has more than one event space. But why waste everything you already have? There it was. I leaned back from the counter. What do you mean by everything? The arch, the flowers, the lighting, those lovely chairs you picked. The draping. Maybe the linens if they don't have to take them immediately. Morgan, half of that stuff is going to sit there for a few hours before someone packs it up anyway. No. The silence on the phone lasted long enough that Nathan lifted his eyebrows at me. Mom gave a short laugh. You don't even know what I was going to ask. Yes, I do. It would only be for a few hours. No. Morgan, if Ashley wants to book a Sunday ceremony at the hotel, I will happily give her Grace's contact information. If she needs vendor recommendations, I'll send those too. But the things Nathan and I rented for our wedding are being removed according to our contracts. Mom lowered her voice. Do you hear yourself? Yes. Your sister just lost $12,000. And I'm sorry that happened. She doesn't have another $80,000 sitting around. Neither do I. We spent hours on our wedding. Nathan looked down at his food, but I saw the corner of his mouth move. He knew better than to smile where Mom might hear it through the phone. Mom kept pushing. She said it was wasteful. She said the flowers would still be fresh. She said guests were already traveling. She said Ashley would never ask because she was too embarrassed. I kept giving her the same answer because I had learned years earlier that if I gave Mom 6 reasons, she treated each reason as a separate obstacle she could negotiate. A simple no gave her less material. Eventually, she sighed. Fine. I just thought family might mean more than a pickup schedule. That isn't fair. No, what happened to your sister isn't fair. I was talking about what you just said. Mom ended the call 2 minutes later, with the stiff politeness she used whenever she wanted me to know I had disappointed her without giving me anything concrete enough to challenge. Nathan waited until I put my phone face down before asking whether I wanted him to say anything. No. You sure? I handled it. He studied me for a moment. I know you did. That should have been the end of it, Mom had asked. I had answered. Ashley and Ethan were adults with jobs, a wedding budget, and their own decisions to make. Nathan and I had our wedding to finish planning. I believed the boundary was clear because I had said it clearly. That was the second thing I misunderstood. In my family, a clear boundary had never meant everyone accepted it. Sometimes it only meant they knew exactly what they would have to work around. Dad called the next morning. Unlike Mom, he did not mention arches or linens. He asked how work was going, asked whether Nathan's construction project had finally stopped running late, and spent several minutes discussing parking at the hotel. Then, as though it had just occurred to him, he said, Your mother told me about the conversation last night. I assumed she would. She's upset. I figured. Dad exhaled. Nobody's saying you should give up your wedding. That's good, because I'm not. You always do that. Do what? Take the most extreme version of what someone says. I walked away from my desk and shut my office door. Dad, Mom asked to use the setup Nathan and I paid for so Ashley could get married in the same hotel the next morning. I said no. That's not an extreme interpretation. That is the conversation. She's looking for solutions. So am I. I sent Ashley 3 venues this morning. That's not really the point. Then what is? He went quiet. When he spoke again, his voice had softened. That was Dad's most effective voice. It made whatever came next sound less like pressure and more like wisdom. You know Ashley doesn't bounce back the way you do. I closed my eyes. There were sentences you could hear for the first time and still recognize as old. That was one of them. When I was 17, my boyfriend broke up with me 2 days before a school dance. It was teenage heartbreak, nothing catastrophic, but at 17 I had believed catastrophe and heartbreak were the same thing. I came home, went straight upstairs, and cried so hard my face hurt. Mom found me sitting on the floor beside my bed. She hugged me for maybe 30 seconds before Ashley started yelling from downstairs because she could not find something she needed for a project. Mom stood up immediately. I remember asking, "Can you stay for a minute?" Mom looked genuinely surprised. "You'll be fine," she said. Ashley's the one I worry about. For years, I treated that sentence like praise. Morgan was fine. Morgan could handle things. Morgan did not need people hovering over her. Morgan was reliable. Morgan was strong. It took me a long time to understand the hidden cost. If I would always be fine, then hurting me became cheaper. I opened my eyes and looked through the glass wall of my office at people moving between conference rooms. Dad, Ashley being more upset by disappointment does not give her more rights to things that belong to me. That's not what I'm saying. It's exactly what you're saying. You just made it sound nicer. You're her older sister. I'm 5 years older, not her emergency fund. Dad's voice hardened slightly. Nobody asked you for money. No, you're asking for things I paid for. I don't see a meaningful difference. Another pause. Then he said, "Your mother is trying to make sure both her daughters have something good to remember this year. My wedding is not a storage closet full of spare parts for Ashley's." He did not like that. I could hear it in the way his breathing changed. "You don't have to decide anything today," he said. I already decided. We ended the call without shouting. That mattered to me at the time. I thought because I had stayed calm, because I had been precise, because nobody could honestly claim they misunderstood me, the issue was settled. For the next few weeks, it looked as though I was right. Ashley thanked me for the venue contacts. She and Ethan toured 2 places. Mom stopped mentioning Sunday. Dad went back to discussing hotel parking and whether his suit needed tailoring. Nathan and I finalized our menu. Grace sent me updated timelines. I approved the last floral invoice and negotiated one final adjustment to the lighting package because I refused to pay for equipment we did not need. Life moved forward in the ordinary, exhausting way weddings do. When you are close enough to the date that every week contains 3 decisions you thought you had already made. I was relieved enough that I stopped watching my family. That is not a sentence I am proud of, because it makes me sound as though I should have been monitoring my parents like adversaries. I did not want to live that way. They were my parents. Ashley was my sister. I wanted to believe that saying no once was supposed to be enough. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was reviewing my inbox during lunch when I saw a confirmation from the rental company handling our lounge furniture, premium linens, and several decorative pieces. I almost archived it without opening because I had already approved the final schedule. Then I noticed the subject line included the words, "Revised pickup." I opened the email. Delivery was unchanged. Setup was unchanged, but the pickup window had moved. Our reception ended Saturday night. The original contract had the rental team beginning their strike after the event and finishing before early Sunday morning. The new confirmation listed pickup for Sunday afternoon. I read it twice. Then I pulled up the contract saved on my work laptop and checked the original schedule. I had not approved an extension. Nathan had not approved an extension. Grace had not sent me a change order. There was no reason those pieces should still be in the hotel on Sunday afternoon. At the bottom of the confirmation was a short note. Family event coordination requested extended hold. I stared at those words until the noise of the office around me seemed to fade. 6 weeks earlier, Mom had asked me to leave our wedding setup in place for Ashley. I had said no clearly enough that even my father had called to argue about it the next morning. And yet someone had started changing the schedule anyway. I called the rental company before I let myself decide what the note meant. That was one habit my family had never managed to train out of me. I could be angry later. First, I wanted to know exactly what had changed, who had changed it, and whether the change was real. The woman who answered pulled up our account and confirmed that the pickup window for the lounge furniture, premium linens, and decorative stands had been moved from early Sunday morning to Sunday afternoon. When I asked who authorized it, she hesitated. "It came through as family event coordination," she said. "The hotel flagged that there may be a second event using some of the same pieces." I asked whether there was a signed amendment. There wasn't. I asked whether my card had been charged for an extension. It hadn't. The request was sitting in their system as pending coordination, but somebody had entered enough information to change the visible schedule on the confirmation they had sent me. "Who submitted it?" I asked. "I can send you the change log," she said. "But I don't want to give you a name before I verify what our coordinator received." "That's fine. Send me exactly what you have." She emailed it within 10 minutes. The log was less dramatic than I wanted and more troubling than I expected. It did not say Ashley. It did not say Mom. It did not say Dad. It simply listed the request source as, quote, "client family coordination through venue," and noted that Sunday afternoon pickup was being held while an extension was reviewed. In other words, nobody had successfully changed my contract yet. But somebody had been trying. I forwarded everything to Grace with one line. "Did you request this?" She called me instead of answering. "No," she said, "and before you ask, no one on my team did either." I swiveled away from my computer and looked out the window of my office. Downtown Portland was gray that afternoon, the kind of June light that made every building look flatter than it really was. "Do you have any Sunday event using our rentals?" "Not under your contract." That wasn't quite my question. Grace went quiet for a beat. "There are Sunday events at the hotel. I don't manage all of them. Can one of them just use our stuff?" "No, not without an extension from the rental company and approval from the people who signed your agreement. That's you and Nathan." "So why does the rental company think there's a family event coordinating with the venue?" "I don't know yet." That answer actually reassured me. Grace never pretended to know something she didn't. It was one of the reasons I had hired her. "Can you check whether anything else changed?" "I already am." By the time she called me back that evening, she had found 2 more irregularities. Our strike schedule with the lighting company still showed the original time, but there was a note asking whether selected fixtures could remain through Sunday morning. The florist had received an inquiry about overnight access to the ceremony arch. Neither request had been approved. Both were still questions, not changes. That distinction mattered to me because I did not want to turn suspicion into certainty before I had earned it. "What exactly did the florist say?" I asked. Grace read from the email. "Family is exploring possible Sunday reuse. Please advise feasibility and extension cost." "Who sent it?" "The inquiry came through hotel event coordination, but it references a family request." I closed my eyes for a moment. That could still be my mother asking questions. "Yes. She already asked me." "I know." And I said no. "I know that too." Grace's tone stayed neutral, but there was enough in the silence afterward to tell me she understood why I was irritated. She also understood the difference between being irritated and having proof. "Nothing is changing without an approved amendment," she said. "Your current contracts still stand." "Good. Do you want me to tell the hotel not to discuss Sunday reuse with anyone?" I almost said yes. Instead, I stopped myself. "Not yet. I want to know what they're asking for." That was the first decision I made that felt strategic rather than defensive. If Mom was only pestering vendors because she had not accepted my answer, I wanted to know how far she had gone. If Ashley was behind it, I wanted to know that too. But I did not want everyone to shut down the moment I looked in their direction. The problem was that I had already spent 38 years learning the wrong reflex around my family. When something felt off, I tended to identify the most likely person and build the case from there. In this situation, that person was Ashley. I knew Mom was capable of pushing. Dad was capable of smoothing over whatever Mom did. But Ashley was the one who would benefit. She had lost her venue. She had asked no follow-up questions when I sent her alternative options. And now, with less than 2 weeks until my wedding, she suddenly seemed very interested in what would still be at the hotel on Sunday. She called me that night, supposedly to ask what shoes she should wear to the rehearsal dinner. We spent 5 minutes discussing something she could have solved by looking at the invitation. Then she asked, "Are most people staying Saturday night?" "Most out-of-town family, yes." "What about Sunday?" I was standing in my bedroom with one heel in my hand. I stopped moving. "What about Sunday? I mean, when are people leaving?" "Different times. Mom said there might be a brunch." "There might be. Are Nathan's parents staying?" "Until Monday." "And your photographer?" That one was too specific. "What about him? How late is he there Saturday?" I set the heel down. "Why?" Ashley laughed lightly. "I don't know. Mom was saying it would be nice to get some family photos while everyone's together. We have family photos scheduled during the wedding. Not everybody will be in those. Then tell me who she wants and I'll see if we can fit them in." "No, it's fine. You just asked when the photographer leaves." I was curious. "Ashley, what? What's happening Sunday?" The pause was small, but it was there. "Brunch," she said. "That's all? Why are you interrogating me?" "I'm asking because vendors connected to my wedding are getting questions about staying through Sunday." Her voice changed. Not much, just enough that the warmth disappeared. "I don't know anything about your vendors." That wasn't what I asked. "Well, maybe Mom asked them something. You know how she gets." Yes, I did. I also knew how Ashley got when she wanted distance from a question without technically lying. She answered something adjacent to it, then made the person asking feel unreasonable. "I'm going to ask you once," I said. "Are you planning to use anything from my wedding on Sunday?" "No." It was a clean answer. Too clean maybe, but I had nothing to push against. "Okay. You don't believe me." "I believe you said no." "That's not the same thing." "No, it isn't." She hung up angry. Nathan came in from the living room a few minutes later and found me sitting on the edge of the bed with my phone still in my hand. He leaned against the doorframe. "Was that Ashley?" "Yes." "Did she tell you anything?" "No." He waited. I looked at him. "You can say it." "Say what?" "That I'm spiraling." "I wasn't going to say that." "You were thinking it." "No. I was thinking you're doing that thing where you get quieter the more upset you are." I looked down at my phone. "I'm not upset." He crossed the room and sat beside me. "You called the rental company during lunch, checked 3 vendor schedules after work, and just had a 10-minute conversation with your sister about where everyone will be on Sunday. You're allowed to be upset. I'm checking contracts." That wasn't what I asked. I hated when he did that. Not because he was wrong, because he was usually right in a way that required me to stop hiding behind the part of myself I trusted most. "I'm angry," I admitted. "And I don't know whether I'm angry at the right person." Nathan nodded. "That sounds more useful. I keep thinking it's Ashley." "Maybe it is. She would benefit. That doesn't make her the person changing schedules." "I know." "Do you?" I turned toward him. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means you know how your family works. Sometimes knowing a pattern makes you faster. Sometimes it makes you stop looking once you find the person who fits it." I stared at him for a few seconds. Nathan was not accusing me of anything. That almost made it worse. He was reminding me of something I already knew from work. If I walked into a vendor dispute convinced I knew who made the mistake, I could waste hours proving the wrong thing. Evidence was supposed to change the conclusion, not decorate it. "I hate that you're making sense," I said. I can try being less helpful. No. He put his hand over mine. Do you want me involved? No. All right. You're not offended? Why would I be? Because I just said no. He smiled. I heard you the first time. That was one of those moments I did not understand fully until later. Nathan did not treat my no as the opening bid in a negotiation. He treated it as information. I had grown up around people who saw boundaries as obstacles, so simple respect still surprised me more than I liked admitting. The next morning, I called Mom. That was my tactical mistake. At the time, it felt responsible. I did not want to spend another week quietly investigating my own family if there was an easy explanation. I told myself I was being direct. Did you contact any of our vendors? I asked. Mom did not even pretend to be confused. I asked a couple of questions. What questions? About whether things had to be taken down immediately. I already told you they did. You told me you didn't want Ashley using your setup? That's not the same as asking what the vendors are capable of doing. It is exactly the same when the reason you're asking is Ashley. You are making this much more dramatic than it is. Mom, the rental company moved a pickup window. They moved it? Someone asked them to. Well, I didn't tell anyone to change your contract. The wording caught my attention. Did you ask them to hold things through Sunday? I asked what it would cost. Through the venue? I don't remember who I spoke to. You spoke to someone. Morgan, I was trying to get information. You already had the information that mattered. I said no. I'm your mother. I'm allowed to ask what options exist. Not with my contracts. She let out a frustrated breath. This is exactly why nobody tells you anything until every detail is figured out. You hear one question and start acting like someone stole your credit card. Then tell me what's being figured out. Nothing. That's not believable. You're getting married in 2 weeks. Why are you choosing to spend your time looking for reasons to be angry at us? That was Mom's favorite reversal. She could move from defending her behavior to diagnosing mine in less than a minute. I'm not looking for reasons, I said. I'm looking at emails. And what have the emails proved? That someone is trying to extend my rentals. Trying, not doing. I had no answer to that because technically she was right. No approved amendment existed yet. Mom heard the pause and softened immediately. See? You're stressed. That's normal. But you're turning basic planning questions into something ugly. If anyone asks about my vendors again, I'm locking every amendment. She was quiet. I mean it, I said. No changes, unless they come directly from me or Grace. All right. The ease of her answer surprised me. That's it? What do you want me to say? I don't know. You've argued with me for 10 minutes. Because I don't like being accused of stealing your wedding. But if you want to micromanage every chair and lamp, fine, it's your wedding. There was enough contempt in the phrase, your wedding, to make it sound like an insult. Good, I said. Then we agree. We ended the call. For the next several days, everything went quiet. No new rental notes, no florist questions, no change requests from the hotel. Grace checked the schedule twice and told me all original strike times were still intact. Ashley stopped asking about Sunday. Mom switched back to discussing whether my seating chart put Aunt Denise too close to Uncle Greg. Dad called once about the rehearsal dinner and did not mention Ashley at all. I mistook silence for resolution. That was partly because I wanted resolution. I had work deadlines. Nathan had a commercial project entering its final inspection phase. We had final guest counts, transportation confirmations, and a dozen small decisions left to make. I did not want to be the woman spending the last 2 weeks before her wedding building a case file against her mother, so I let myself relax. 3 days later, Grace forwarded an email from our florist. The subject line was simple: Sunday Arch Hold. The florist wrote that hotel event coordination had asked whether our ceremony arch and one of the large floral installations could remain in place overnight for a Sunday reset. They had not agreed. They wanted to know whether I intended to authorize an extension and, if so, whether they should price additional labor and floral handling. I read the email once. Then again. Then I called Grace. I thought this stopped. So did I. Did Mom contact them? Not directly, according to the florist. Who did? The inquiry came through the hotel. Does the hotel think I approved it? I'm checking. Is there a Sunday wedding? Grace was quiet. That silence was different from the others. Professional, not evasive. There's a Sunday event, she said carefully. I don't manage it, and I can't disclose another client's information just because we're suspicious. I appreciated the answer even while it frustrated me. Fine. Then don't tell me who it is. Tell me whether it has any legitimate right to use my arch. No. Good. Morgan. Yes? I think we should stop treating this as your mother asking annoying questions. A cold pressure settled under my ribs. What do you think we should treat it as? A coordination problem that could affect your contracts. That was Grace's way of saying something was wrong without making a claim she could not support. I opened the florist email again. Sunday reset. Not Sunday brunch. Not family photos. Reset. Don't change anything, I said. I wasn't planning to. If anyone asks again, forward it to me. I will. And don't tell them I'm asking questions. Grace paused. All right. That was the moment I finally understood my first mistake. Calling Mom had not cleared anything up. It had only told whoever was behind the requests that I was watching the obvious route. I stopped calling my family after that. I started documenting them. I started with a timeline because timelines were harder to argue with than memories. I opened a blank document on my laptop and listed every contact I could verify. Mom's first suggestion about Sunday, Dad's follow-up call, the revised rental pickup, the lighting inquiry, the florist's question about the arch, Ashley asking about the photographer, and every conversation Grace had reported back to me. Beside each item, I wrote what I actually knew and what I was only assuming. It looked almost embarrassingly simple when I finished. I knew someone connected to my family wanted parts of my wedding setup to remain through Sunday. I knew Mom had asked about it after I had said no. I knew Ashley was interested in Sunday logistics. I knew the hotel had another event on Sunday. I did not know who had booked it. I did not know whether Ashley was involved. I did not know whether anyone had successfully changed a contract. Most importantly, I did not know who was telling vendors they had permission to keep asking. That distinction mattered, because I had already made one mistake by treating suspicion like a conclusion. Calling Mom had accomplished exactly one useful thing. It taught me that whoever was behind the requests would get quieter if they knew I was watching. I decided I would not make that mistake again. From then on, I stopped asking my family what they were doing. I started asking the people who actually controlled access, contracts, equipment, and money what had been requested of them. Grace and I met at the hotel 10 days before the wedding. Nathan was at work, and I had taken a long lunch because I wanted to walk through the ceremony and reception spaces one more time before the final vendor meeting. The hotel lobby smelled faintly of coffee and the enormous arrangement of white lilies near the elevators. I remember that because the place still felt uncomplicated then. It was supposed to be where I got married, not where I needed to think about authorization protocols. Grace met me with her tablet under one arm and a folder full of printed timelines under the other. We walked through the ballroom first. Tables had not been set yet, but taped floor marks showed where the lounge furniture would go, where the band platform would sit, and where the lighting team would run cable without creating a trip hazard. Grace moved through the space with the calm efficiency I liked about her, pointing out changes from the final site meeting. She did not mention Sunday until we had finished almost everything else. There's one thing I want to clarify before we leave, she said. I looked at her. Sunday? She nodded. Did you find out whose event it is? I know there is a private booking. I'm not the planner on it, and the hotel can't just give me another client's information because we think there may be overlap. That's fair. She gave me a look that suggested she had expected more resistance. I don't need to know who it is yet, I said. I need to know whether they can touch anything attached to my contracts. They cannot. Can the hotel hold my rentals overnight without me? Not if that changes your vendor terms. Can someone in my family authorize it for me? Not unless your contracts say they can. They don't. Then no. That should have been enough. But by then, I had learned the difference between what was supposed to happen and what people might try anyway. I want that in writing. Grace did not look offended. Good. We sat down in a small meeting room off the ballroom corridor. I pulled up the master vendor list and went through the names with her. Rental company, florist, lighting, draping, lounge furniture, the hotel's internal event manager. Anything that involved Saturday equipment remaining in place after our event went onto a shorter list. I want one rule, I said. Starting now, no amendment to anything under our Saturday contracts is valid unless it comes directly from me or you. Grace nodded. I can send that. I want it from me. She looked up. Not because I don't trust you. Because if anyone later says they thought a family member was speaking for me, I want there to be no ambiguity about what address they were supposed to recognize. That was the first moment I saw Grace's expression change from professional concern to something sharper. You think somebody might try to represent themselves as authorized? I think people have already been comfortable asking questions after I said no. I don't know what they'll do next. Then make the rule specific. So I did. From the same email address I had used for every wedding contract, I sent a message to the hotel event manager and the key vendors. I kept the wording plain. Effective immediately, any changes to delivery, strike, rental duration, installation removal, or carryover associated with our Saturday wedding had to come directly from me or from Grace through the contact information already on file. No parent, sibling, relative, guest, or outside planner had authority to amend our agreements. Any phone verification had to use my number or Grace's number already listed in the contract records. If a request came from anywhere else, I asked them to hold it and contact one of us before taking action. I did not accuse anyone of fraud. I did not mention Ashley. I did not mention Mom. I treated it like a normal control procedure. Within an hour, every key vendor acknowledged the instruction. The rental company replied that their earlier Sunday pickup notation would remain pending unless I authorized an extension. The florist confirmed the arch would be removed according to the original strike schedule unless they heard from me directly. The lighting company did the same. The hotel manager wrote that they had updated our event file so family requests would be treated as inquiries only. I read every response twice. For the first time since the revised pickup email appeared, I felt something in my chest loosen. Not because I thought the problem was over, because now I knew my wedding was protected even if the problem continued. There was an important difference. I did not understand that difference when I was younger. For most of my life, if I sensed a conflict coming, I tried to stop the conflict itself. If Mom and Ashley were fighting, I found the compromise. If Dad was irritated because Mom had changed a plan, I figured out the schedule. If Ashley got overwhelmed, I reduced the number of decisions in front of her until she could breathe again. I called it efficiency. My family called it reliability. Nobody called it what it sometimes became, a way for everyone else to avoid learning how to live with discomfort. Ashley had not always been entitled. That is easy to forget when you are telling the end of a story first. When she was 14, she was supposed to perform in a school music program. She had practiced for weeks and talked about almost nothing else. On the night of the performance, she made it as far as backstage before she panicked. I was 19 and home from college for the weekend. Mom called me from the auditorium because Ashley had locked herself in a restroom and refused to come out. When I got there, Mom was standing outside the door whispering angrily, "Everyone is waiting." Ashley was crying hard enough that I could hear her through the wall. Mom looked at me as if I had arrived to solve a mechanical failure. "Talk to her." I knocked. "Ash, it's me." "No, I'm not asking you to come out." The crying quieted slightly. Mom grabbed my arm. "What are you doing?" "Of course she has to come out." I pulled away and said, "Give me a minute." Ashley eventually unlocked the door and let me sit on the tile floor beside her. She kept saying she had ruined everything. The teacher was waiting, her friends were waiting, Mom was waiting, the audience was waiting. I remember telling her, "You don't have to perform just because everyone is waiting. If you want to go out there, I'll walk you back. If you don't, we'll deal with everybody else." She did not perform that night. Mom was furious on the drive home. I did not regret it. At 19, I thought I was protecting my little sister from pressure. I still think I did the right thing in that moment. What I did not understand was how often Mom would later use the fear of public disappointment in the opposite direction. Ashley grew up being protected from it. I grew up being expected to absorb it. 10 days before my wedding, sitting in a hotel meeting room while vendors confirmed that only I could approve changes to my own contracts, I did not make that connection yet. Looking back now, it feels almost painfully obvious. After Grace and I finished, I went back to work and tried to behave like a person who was getting married instead of a person auditing her family. For 2 days, nothing happened. No new inquiry reached Grace. No vendor called. Mom sent me 3 texts about table numbers and 1 photograph of shoes she thought were too casual for the rehearsal dinner. Dad asked whether the hotel valet took cash tips. Ashley sent me a picture of earrings and asked which pair worked better with her dress. Normal family noise returned so convincingly that I almost believed the authorization email had solved everything. Then Ashley asked me who was staying through Sunday. We were on the phone talking about transportation from the rehearsal dinner. She had offered to ride with Mom and Dad, which was fine with me. I was checking a spreadsheet while she talked when she suddenly said, "Do you know how many people are still at the hotel Sunday morning?" I stopped typing. Why? For brunch. What brunch? Mom mentioned maybe doing something. She mentioned that weeks ago. Well, I guess she's still thinking about it. Who's invited? I don't know. You just asked me how many people are staying. Because I was curious. There was that word again. I leaned back in my desk chair. Most of the out-of-town family stays Saturday night. Some leave early Sunday. Nathan's parents are there until Monday. What about Aunt Denise? Sunday afternoon, I think. And the Millers? I don't know. Cousin Leah? Ashley? What? Why are you taking attendance? She laughed, but it sounded forced. I'm not. You just named 3 separate groups. Mom asked who might be around. Then Mom can ask me. She doesn't want another fight. There doesn't have to be a fight. Ashley went quiet. I decided not to ask whether she was planning a wedding. That was exactly what I would have done a week earlier, and exactly what I had promised myself I would stop doing. Instead, I asked one narrower question. Is Sunday about you? Another pause. Why would it be about me? That's not an answer. You're doing it again. Doing what? Making everything sound suspicious. I asked whether Sunday is about you. There might be a brunch. For you? For family. I stared at my screen without seeing it. Okay. That's it? That's it. She sounded almost unsettled by my lack of confrontation. You're not going to ask more questions? If you want to tell me something, you can. I don't have anything to tell you. Then we're done. After we hung up, I added the call to my timeline. That was when I first wrote one sentence at the bottom of the document. Sunday event may involve Ashley. Not Ashley is behind it. Not Ashley is lying. Just may involve Ashley. It seems like a tiny distinction now. At the time, it took effort. Dad made it harder 2 days later. He called me while I was driving home from work. I had him on hands-free, and we were talking about the rehearsal dinner when he said, "Your mother thinks you're still upset about Sunday." I haven't spoken to Mom about Sunday since last week. She can tell. Tell what? That you think Ashley is trying to take something from you? My hands tightened slightly around the steering wheel. I never said that to Mom. Dad did not answer immediately. I never said it to you either, I added. I know how you get. What does that mean? You see Ashley involved in something and assume the worst. There it was. Maybe he was making a reasonable guess. Maybe Mom had guessed. Maybe Ashley had complained that I had been asking questions. Any of those explanations could have worked. Then Dad said, "You don't need to make her feel guilty about Sunday." I took the next exit more slowly than usual. Guilty about what? You know what I mean. No, Dad, I actually don't. The whole situation. What situation? The venue. Everything she lost. That happened 6 weeks ago. He sighed. Morgan, don't turn this into an interrogation. I asked what you meant by Sunday. I meant the weekend. No, you didn't. A long silence filled the car. I could hear traffic through the phone on his end, which meant he was probably driving too. He finally said, "Your mother is trying to arrange something nice for the family. That's all." Then why would Ashley feel guilty? She shouldn't. That's not what I asked. Because you're tense around her. I've seen her once this week. You know what I mean. Actually, I did not. But I knew enough to stop. Okay, I said. Dad sounded surprised. Okay? Okay. You're not going to argue? No. Another pause. Good, he said finally. You have enough to deal with before the wedding. We finished the call talking about dinner. When I got home, Nathan was standing at the kitchen island reading something on his laptop. I put my bag down and opened my timeline before I even took off my shoes. What happened? He asked. Dad knows I suspect Ashley. Did you tell him? No. Did you tell your mom? Not directly. Could Ashley have told them? She could have told Mom I asked about Sunday. Nathan closed the laptop. So it's not proof? No. He nodded toward my screen. What are you writing? Exactly that. I typed. Mark referenced Ashley feeling guilty about Sunday before I had told him I believed Sunday involved her. Possible inference from Laura, Ashley. Not proof he knows event details. Nathan read over my shoulder. Very romantic. I promised you romance next Saturday. I'll put it on the calendar. I smiled despite myself. That night, I made one more decision. I emailed Grace and told her not to confront anyone about requests unless a vendor needed an immediate answer. If a family member asked about Sunday, she could answer whatever was appropriate about the hotel's own services. But anything touching our Saturday contracts should simply be forwarded and held. Grace replied. Understood. No changes without your authorization. No need to alert the requester unless action is required. That was the system I wanted. Not a trap. Not a sting operation. A record. If nothing else happened, I would have a few strange emails and an awkward family story. I would be happy to be wrong. If something did happen, I wanted it to happen without my family knowing exactly what I had seen. The next several days were quiet enough that wedding preparations swallowed everything else. I approved the final guest count. Nathan and I practiced our first dance in our living room and nearly knocked over a lamp. I picked up my dress after its last alteration. Grace sent the final ceremony cue sheet. Work became chaotic because one of my suppliers missed a delivery deadline, which was almost comforting. Vendor problems at work were straightforward. Someone failed to deliver, someone paid a penalty. Everyone moved on. Family problems never respected a clean invoice. 3 days before the wedding, I was in a meeting when Grace called twice. The second call made me excuse myself. I stepped into the hall and answered, What happened? Nothing happened to your event. That was not how people started normal calls. Grace, I need you to come by the hotel when you can. Why? There was an attire delivery. For me? No. I glanced back through the conference room window. My coworkers were waiting. Whose? Grace lowered her voice, even though I doubted anyone near her could hear. Ashley's. I did not say anything. The boutique courier delivered a garment bag to the secured wardrobe room, she continued. The hotel accepts attire for multiple events, so the delivery itself isn't unusual. What kind of garment bag? Another brief silence. White bridal storage bag. Boutique tag. The fluorescent hallway suddenly felt very cold. I asked, Are you sure it's hers? I'm looking at the tag. What does it say? Ashley Ellis. I closed my eyes. Every clue I had spent the last week, forcing myself not to connect, seemed to move toward the same point at once. The Sunday questions. The photographer. The relatives staying over. The arch. The reset. Dad telling me not to make Ashley feel guilty. Still, I made myself ask the only question that mattered. Did you open it? No. Good. Don't. I wasn't going to. Leave it exactly where the hotel received it. That's the plan. I looked through the conference room glass again. My presentation was still on the screen. Numbers, deadlines, supplier names. A world where everything could be traced back to whoever had signed for it. I'll come by after work, I said. Grace hesitated. Morgan, there's one more thing. What? The boutique instructions say the dress needs to be steamed and ready for Sunday pickup. I stood in that hallway with my phone pressed to my ear and understood that whatever my family was arranging for Sunday was no longer just about leftover flowers or a brunch. There was another bride coming to my hotel. I left work a little after 6 and drove straight to the hotel. By then, I had spent the entire afternoon telling myself not to turn a garment bag into a confession. Ashley owned a wedding dress. Of course she did. Her original wedding had been planned for months before the venue collapsed, and the boutique needed somewhere to send the finished gown. A hotel with secure wardrobe storage was not an absurd place to keep it, especially if Mom had arranged some kind of Sunday brunch or photo session. Every explanation I came up with was technically possible. None of them made the words Sunday pickup feel less deliberate. Grace met me near the ballroom elevators and led me toward a service corridor I had never noticed during our earlier walkthroughs. The hotel used a secured wardrobe room for formal wear deliveries, garment steaming, and attire connected to weddings and conferences. It was not part of the storage space rented under my event package. That mattered immediately. Whatever Ashley's dress was doing at the hotel, it was not sitting among my belongings, and I had no right to treat it like evidence I could seize. Grace stopped outside a locked door with a narrow glass panel. The wardrobe attendant already logged the delivery. Nobody opened it except the boutique before sealing it for transport. "Can I see the tag without going inside?" "Yes." She spoke to the attendant, who moved one of the hanging bags closer to the glass. I could see a white protective cover with the boutique's logo printed near the top. A narrow delivery sleeve was clipped to the hanger. Ashley's name was visible in block letters. Ashley Ellis. Below it, in smaller type, was a handling note. Steam Saturday evening. Ready for Sunday pickup. That was all I could read. I stared for several seconds, then stepped back. Grace watched me carefully. "Do you want me to ask the boutique anything?" "Not yet." "Do you want the hotel to release it back to them?" "No, it isn't mine." That answer came more easily than I expected. The dress belonged to Ashley. The hotel had accepted it under whatever wardrobe arrangement existed for the weekend. I could ask questions about my contracts. I could stop people from using what Nathan and I paid for. I was not going to grab my sister's wedding dress because I disliked the timing of its delivery. "Do you know which event file it's attached to?" I asked. Grace shook her head. Wardrobe deliveries aren't always tied to the event system immediately. Sometimes the boutique sends them under the guest's name and the hotel links them later. So right now all you know is that Ashley's wedding dress is here, and somebody wants it ready Sunday. That's all I can say for certain. I nodded. Then that's all we know. Grace gave me a small, approving look. I almost laughed because I did not feel disciplined. I felt like someone standing outside a locked room trying not to kick the door open. I called Ashley from the hotel lobby. She answered on the 4th ring. "Hey, are you busy?" "Not really." "Why? Did your bridal boutique deliver your dress to the hotel today?" Silence. "Not long enough to prove anything." "Long enough to register." "Yes," she said. "Okay." Another pause. "How did you know?" Grace saw the delivery record. Why was Grace looking at my dress? She wasn't. The hotel logged it, and she recognized your name. Ashley exhaled in a way that sounded more annoyed than nervous. Mom handled the delivery. "Why is it being steamed for Sunday?" "Because it needed somewhere to go." "That answers why it's at the hotel. It doesn't answer Sunday." "What do you want me to say?" "The truth would be useful." "That is the truth." I moved away from the lobby seating and stood near the windows facing the street. Evening traffic was crawling through downtown. "You told me there might be a family brunch Sunday. Your dress is here for Sunday pickup. Vendors connected to my wedding have been asked about keeping decor overnight. I'm not imagining those things. I never said you were. You keep answering everything except the part that connects them." Ashley was quiet again. Then she said, "We lost our venue. Mom thought keeping the dress at the hotel was easier than moving it around." "Where were you going to move it?" "I don't know." Ashley. "What? Are you getting married Sunday?" She inhaled sharply enough that I heard it through the phone. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then she gave a brittle laugh. "Seriously?" "Yes. You see my dress, and now I'm secretly getting married at your hotel? I see your dress scheduled for Sunday pickup after weeks of questions about my vendors being kept through Sunday. That doesn't make it my wedding." "No, which is why I'm asking. You always do this. I closed my eyes. Do what? You collect details and act like everyone else is stupid because you noticed them. That isn't what I'm doing. It is exactly what you're doing. Then answer the question. No? The word landed hard enough that for one instant I thought she was finally saying no, she was not getting married. Then she added, I'm not doing this with you. Ashley, are you getting married Sunday? I said I'm not doing this. She hung up. I stayed beside the window with my phone in my hand. That was not an answer. It was also not proof. I wrote the distinction into my timeline before I left the hotel. Ashley confirmed mom arranged dress delivery. Refused to answer direct question about Sunday wedding. Under that, I added another line. Do not assume refusal equals admission. It was getting exhausting writing notes to protect myself from my own conclusions. Mom called before I reached home. I knew Ashley had called her because Mom did not bother with hello. Why are you interrogating your sister about her wedding dress? Because it's being held at my wedding hotel for Sunday. So vendors attached to my event keep getting questions about Sunday. I thought we finished this. I did too. Morgan, her venue closed. She had nowhere to send the dress. Then why does the boutique say Sunday pickup? For steaming. Why Sunday? For whatever Ashley wants to do with her own dress. That is an impressive way to avoid answering. Mom made a sound of disbelief. Do you hear yourself? Her wedding collapsed 6 weeks ago. And instead of giving her 1 inch of grace, you're turning a dress delivery into some kind of conspiracy. I haven't accused her of anything. You asked if she was secretly getting married. I asked whether she was getting married Sunday. Same thing. No. One is a question. You made her cry. That stopped me. Did I? Of course she cried. I looked at the road ahead. Then she can call me and tell me that. You are unbelievable. I asked a direct question. You don't get to demand answers from everyone just because you paid for a ballroom. And nobody gets to use paying for that ballroom as a reason to hide things connected to it. There you go again. Again what? Making everything about your contracts. I almost laughed. The only reason contracts are involved is because someone keeps contacting people who are under them. Nobody is taking anything from you. Then this should be easy. Tell me there is no Sunday wedding involving my setup. Mom went quiet. Not offended quiet. Not angry quiet. The kind of quiet that made me hear my own breathing. Finally, she said, Ashley's life does not revolve around your permission. I didn't say it did. She is allowed to make plans. Yes. Even the weekend of your wedding. Yes. Mom seemed thrown by that. I continued before she could redirect. If Ashley wants to get married Sunday and you pay for a separate event, that's not my decision. If any part of that plan uses things under my Saturday contracts, it becomes my business. You really can't let her have anything without measuring what portion belongs to you. There it was again. Not a denial. A moral accusation. I can let her have anything that's hers. You've always been like this. No, I spent years doing the opposite. Mom's tone sharpened. Don't rewrite your childhood because you're stressed before your wedding. I nearly answered that, then stopped. That conversation would have taken us exactly where Mom wanted. Away from Sunday and into a debate about whether I was a good sister. I'm not discussing childhood, I said. I'm discussing whether my vendors are being asked to support something I refused. They aren't. Good. They are not being used. That wasn't quite what I said. Mom exhaled loudly. I cannot do this with you tonight. Then don't. She hung up. I sat in my car for a minute after reaching home, replaying the conversation. I had asked for a simple denial. Mom had refused to give one. That felt significant. But even then, I knew significance was not evidence. Nathan was making pasta when I came inside. He took one look at me and turned the burner down. The dress is real, I said. That sounded ominous. Ashley's wedding dress, at the hotel, ready for Sunday pickup. He leaned against the counter. Did you ask her? Yes. And? She refused to answer whether she's getting married Sunday. Nathan considered that. That sounds suspicious. Thank you. But you're about to tell me suspicious isn't proof. I hate how well you know me. He smiled faintly. Do you want me to ask the more important question? Go ahead. Does the dress affect our wedding? No. Does Ashley keeping it at the hotel affect our wedding? No. Then leave the dress alone. I looked at him. You asked. I know. He stirred the sauce and added, if your sister's planning something, you'll find out. You don't need to win the argument before you know what the argument is. That was irritatingly sensible. I thought about asking the hotel to send the dress back. Why? Because I'm annoyed. That is at least an honest reason. I didn't. Good. I also thought about asking Grace to photograph the delivery slip. Nathan turned toward me. Did you? No. Also good. I dropped my bag onto a chair. You're enjoying this. I'm enjoying watching you choose not to become the person your mother is probably telling everyone you are. That landed deeper than he intended. I looked at him. What person is that? The one who controls everything because she can't stand Ashley having something. I went still. Nathan immediately shook his head. I'm not saying that's true. I know. I'm saying if that's the story being built, don't help build it. I sat at the counter. That was the thing about Nathan. He could tell me not to do something without making me feel managed. He did not say, calm down. He did not say, let me handle this. He just reminded me which version of myself I wanted to be when the situation was over. I'm not touching the dress, I said. Good. If it's still there Saturday, I'm still going to hate it. You can hate it from a legally respectful distance. I laughed despite myself. The next morning, Grace called before 9. I have something new, she said. Please tell me it's not another dress. No. Good start. The florist forwarded an internal coordination note from the hotel. I sat up straighter at my desk. What kind of note? They were asked whether the large installation behind your ceremony arch could remain stable through an overnight reset. We already knew that. This one uses different wording. What wording? Grace read it carefully. Please advise feasibility for Sunday ceremony reset following Saturday strike transition. I stopped breathing for half a second. Ceremony? Yes. Not brunch? Ceremony. Could ceremony mean something else? Not usually in event operations. I pulled up my timeline. Does this mean the florist agreed? No, they haven't. Does the hotel have my authorization? No. Then nothing changes. Correct. I could hear typing on Grace's end. What are you doing? I asked. Checking whether the Sunday event file has been linked to your strike coordination. Can you see the client now? I can see that there is a private event, but I still cannot give you another client's name unless the hotel determines there's a contractual reason. Fine. You're taking that better than expected. I'm learning. That sounds dangerous. I smiled despite myself. Can you ask the event manager one question? What? Does the Sunday ceremony depend on anything I'm paying for? Grace paused. That I can ask. She called back 40 minutes later. The answer was not clean. The Sunday event had its own room booking, its own basic chair package, its own catering minimum. Whoever booked it was paying the hotel separately. But internal notes referenced a possible carryover from the Saturday wedding. Mine. What exactly is carryover? I asked. Potential use of upgraded lighting, draping, selected furniture, linens, ceremony structure, and floral installations. All the expensive parts. Most of the visual upgrade, yes. Is it approved? No. Then why is it in the Sunday file? Because somebody requested coordination. Who? I'm still not cleared to give you the Sunday client identity. I rubbed my forehead. Grace. I am trying very hard to respect that. I know. But my assets are now written inside someone else's event planning notes. Yes. That seems like my business. I agree. There was something in her voice that made me wait. I asked the hotel manager to review whether the Sunday booking has become materially dependent on your contracted items, she continued. If the answer is yes, they can disclose the relevant overlap because it affects your rights as the Saturday client. When will you know? Probably today. I thanked her and hung up. That was the first time I had proof that the Sunday event was not simply happening near my wedding. Someone was planning it around my wedding. I added the florist's note to my timeline and highlighted the words Sunday ceremony reset. Then I sat back and tried to examine my own assumptions. Ashley had a wedding dress in the hotel. Ashley had asked about Sunday guests. Ashley had asked about my photographer. The Sunday event was a ceremony. The Sunday event wanted my upgraded setup. Every emotional instinct I had said Ashley. But the more procedural part of my brain kept hitting the same wall. Ashley could ask Mom for things. She could lie to me. She could avoid answering questions. She could accept a wedding she knew made me angry. What she could not easily do was make hotel departments start coordinating strike schedules. She had never signed my contracts. She did not know most of my vendors. She did not know which lounge furniture company I used until I sent the final family weekend schedule. She certainly did not know enough about rental amendments to create language like carryover approval or strike transition. Somebody else was doing that. That thought did not make me feel better. It made Ashley look less like the architect and more like the person standing inside a house someone else was building for her. I called her that afternoon. She did not answer. An hour later, she texted, "In meetings. What do you need?" I replied, "Your dress is fine where it is. I'm not asking the hotel to move it." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then returned. Finally, she wrote, "Thank you." I stared at the message. I typed, "I still need to know what's happening Sunday." I deleted it before sending. Not because I no longer cared. Because if Ashley wanted to keep lying by omission, another confrontation would only teach her what I knew. That evening, she called me. "I saw your text," she said. "Okay. Mom thought you were going to have the dress removed. I can't remove something that isn't mine." She said you were furious. I am furious. Ashley went quiet. "Those aren't the same thing," I added. "Being angry doesn't give me ownership of your dress. I didn't know if you'd see it that way. You could have asked me." The irony of that sentence did not occur to me until much later. Ashley changed the subject. "Did you finalize photography?" "Yes." "How long is he staying?" I almost laughed. "You asked me that already." "I know. I forgot." "No, you didn't." She sighed. "Why are you making this weird?" "I'm not. Could he maybe stay an extra hour Sunday morning if somebody paid him?" "Sunday morning?" "For family pictures. Our photographer is contracted for Saturday." "So that's a no?" "That's a no unless he independently wants another job and you contact him yourself after my contract ends." Ashley was silent. "Do you want his business email?" "No." "Then why did you ask?" "Mom thought it might be nice." I looked at the wall across from me. "What time Sunday morning?" "What?" "The family pictures." "I don't know." "Ashley." "Early. Before brunch?" Another silence. I did not push. "Okay," I said. She sounded irritated. "Why do you keep saying okay like that?" "Like what?" "Like you're taking notes." I looked down at the timeline open on my laptop. "I'm getting married in 3 days. I'm taking notes about everything." "That is so you." "Probably." We ended the call without another fight. I wrote photographer inquiry Sunday morning beneath the dress delivery note. Then, underneath it, I wrote something new. Ashley likely knows Sunday event exists. Still unclear whether she knows how carryover is being arranged. That was the fairest version I could write. The next day, Grace asked me to come to the hotel again. I was starting to feel like I worked there. The event manager, a woman named Priya Shah, joined us in a small office behind the ballroom. I had met her twice before during contract review. She was careful, direct, and looked unhappy to be having the conversation. "I want to start by saying your Saturday event is not at risk," she said. "That is a sentence people keep saying before telling me something terrible." Grace almost smiled. Priya did not. "Your authorization restriction is active," she said. "No Saturday assets have been approved for transfer or extension." "Okay. The issue is that the Sunday event file includes requests that reference those assets." "I know that much. Because the requests now affect our strike coordination and your contracted removal windows, I can share the identifying information for the overlapping event." I felt my pulse quicken. Priya turned her monitor slightly toward me. The screen showed a Sunday booking summary. I did not read every field. I saw the date first, June 15th, morning access. Approximately 60 guests. Basic catering package. Ceremony setup. Then I saw the event title. Ellis Parker Ceremony. For a few seconds, I did nothing. Grace did not say Ashley's name. She did not need to. Ellis was my family name. Parker was Ethan's. I looked at Priya. Who signed the Sunday room contract? I can tell you that the Sunday event is separately contracted and paid for. It is not under your account. Who signed it? Laura and Mark Ellis are the primary billing contacts. Mom and Dad, not Ashley. I looked back at the screen. Does Ethan know this booking exists? I can't answer what he personally knows. Fair. Does Ashley? I also can't speak to her knowledge. Fair. I hated how reasonable everyone was being. What parts of my wedding does their Sunday file say they expect to use? Priya pulled up the overlap note. Ceremony arch, selected draping, upgraded lighting, 2 lounge groupings, premium linens, large floral installations, decorative stands. I gave a short, humorless laugh. So basically, everything my mother listed when I told her no. Neither woman answered. Is any of that approved? No. Could it become approved without me? No. Then keep the original strike. We will. I leaned back in the chair. Part of me had expected relief once I finally knew what Sunday was. Instead, I felt something colder. My parents had booked my sister a wedding the morning after mine. That alone was not something I could forbid. But they had done it after I explicitly refused to let them build it out of my wedding. And somewhere between that conversation and this screen, somebody had decided my no was a scheduling problem. I looked again at the names. UK, Laura Ellis, Mark Ellis. For the first time since the strange emails started, Ashley was no longer the person I most needed to understand. Who requested the carryover? I asked. Priya's expression tightened. That, she said, is what we're still reviewing. I looked down at the Sunday booking title one more time. 3 days earlier, I had thought the worst possibility was that Ashley wanted to steal a few hours of my wedding setup. Now I knew there was an actual wedding waiting on the other side of my reception. What I still did not know was who had decided they had the right to build it with mine. I kept staring at the Sunday booking until the words stopped looking like language and became shapes on a screen. Ellis Parker ceremony. 60 guests. Morning access. Basic catering. Separate billing. Mom and Dad listed as the primary contacts. For several seconds, the part of me that had spent the last week trying to avoid emotional conclusions simply went blank. There was no longer a question about whether Sunday involved Ashley. There was a wedding. It had been booked inside the same hotel before mine had even happened. The only thing still uncertain was how much of mine my parents had expected to carry across the night with it. Priya turned the monitor back toward herself. I want to be very clear about one thing, she said. The Sunday event is a valid booking. It exists independently of yours. I understand. Basic room use, chairs, catering, and standard setup are covered under that contract. And the upgraded parts? Those are not. Because they're mine. Because they're under your Saturday vendor agreements. That distinction mattered. I forced myself to hold on to it. My parents were allowed to rent another room. Ashley was allowed to get married the next morning. Ethan was allowed to marry her if he wanted. None of that gave me the right to cancel anything. The problem was not that their event existed. The problem was that someone had designed part of it around assets Nathan and I had already paid for after I had explicitly refused permission. Show me exactly what is pending, I said. Priya opened a coordination note. Grace moved her chair closer so we could both see. The Sunday file listed the hotel's basic setup as confirmed, then several add-ons under a section labeled Carryover Pending Approval, Ceremony Arch, Premium Draping, Upgraded Lighting, 2 lounge clusters, Premium Linens, Large Floral Installations, Decorative Stands. It was almost a word-for-word translation of the things Mom had mentioned during that first phone call, back when she had pretended she was only brainstorming. I pointed at the status column. Pending means not approved. Correct. And nothing under that list stays unless I approve it. Correct. Even if someone tells you I changed my mind. Priya's face tightened slightly. That is where the audit comes in. I looked at her. What audit? She clicked into another section. After your authorization restriction was added to the file, we received a message related to the Sunday carryover. It did not come from the email address we had on record for you. What did it say? I can't give you the full content until we finish reviewing the communication chain, because we need to establish whether it was intended as an authorization, a relay from a family member, or simply a coordination request. That sounds careful. It is. Does the email claim to be from me? Priya hesitated. It uses your name. Grace turned toward her. Meaning? Meaning the sender identifies the request as being on Morgan's behalf. I felt my stomach tighten. What address? Priya did not read it aloud. She wrote it on a notepad and turned it toward me. At first glance, it looked like mine. At second glance, it did not. The domain was correct because it was a common public email provider, but the username contained an extra initial and one transposed letter. Nothing dramatic. The kind of difference a busy coordinator might miss if they were moving quickly between dozens of emails. That is not my address, I said. We know. Did anyone approve anything based on it? No permanent amendment was made. Why not? Because your authorization lock required us to verify against the contact information already on file. That was the first moment all week I felt grateful for my own paranoia. What happened after the email came in? Priya looked at Grace, then back at me. The coordinator requested verification. There was a follow-up response saying you were overwhelmed with wedding week and had asked a family member to handle the family extension. Which family member? We are still verifying that part. Do you have a name? We have references. I'm not prepared to identify someone until the communication trail is complete. I wanted to push. Every nerve in my body wanted to push. But Priya was doing exactly what I had asked everyone else to do. Separate what they knew from what they suspected. I could not punish her for being more disciplined than my family. Fine, I said, but I want one thing locked now. The Sunday event does not get any Saturday asset unless I personally sign an amendment. It won't. No verbal approval. Agreed. No parent speaking for me. Agreed. No sibling. Agreed. No one saying I'm too busy to respond. Priya nodded. Morgan, your Saturday file already reflects that. I'm telling you again because I don't want you walking out of here believing your wedding is exposed. It isn't. That should have calmed me more than it did. I looked at the Sunday event title again. Does Ashley know this is booked? I can't answer what she personally knows. Does Ethan? Same answer. Do either of them appear anywhere on the event file? Ashley and Ethan are listed as the couple. But Mom and Dad are billing. Yes. That told me enough to be uncomfortable, without telling me enough to accuse anyone. Grace closed her tablet. The practical question is what Morgan wants done now. I want Saturday exactly as contracted, already happening, and I want any future request involving carryover forwarded to me. Done. I stood up. Then, we leave Sunday alone. Priya blinked. You don't want to challenge the booking? It's not mine to challenge. Grace looked at me for a second, and I knew she understood what that choice cost me emotionally. If my parents rented a ballroom Sunday, that's their business. I continued. If Ashley is getting married Sunday, that's her business. I care the second somebody tries to use something Nathan and I paid for without permission. Priya nodded. That is the cleanest position. Clean was the word I needed. I could not control the fact that there was another wedding in the hotel the morning after mine. I could control whether my contracts became a family resource pool. I left the hotel with more information than I had walked in with, and somehow felt less certain about who I was angry with. Ashley was obviously involved in the Sunday wedding. She had known enough to ask about people staying over and about our photographer. Her dress was sitting in hotel wardrobe storage waiting for Sunday morning, but she was not listed as the billing contact. She was not the person coordinating the room. She did not know the names of half my vendors. The more I learned, the harder it was to believe she had built the mechanism herself. That did not make her innocent. It made her role harder to define. Mom was easier. She had asked me directly for the setup. I had said no. Now the same setup appeared in a Sunday planning file under pending carryover. Whatever else I still did not know, Mom had not accepted my answer. Dad was the piece I could not place. He had called me after Mom's first request. He had told me Ashley did not bounce back like I did. He had warned me not to make her feel guilty about Sunday before I had ever told him I thought Sunday involved her. But Dad's entire identity in family conflict was built around staying one step away from obvious responsibility. He did not invent plans. He made calls. He smoothed things over. He told everyone they were misunderstanding each other until the person most willing to compromise did it. Usually that person was me. By the time I got home, Nathan was sitting at the dining table with rolls of drawings from a project spread around his laptop. He looked up as soon as I walked in. "You know," I said, "that sounds like either good news or terrible news. There is a Sunday wedding." His expression changed. "At our hotel?" "Yes." "Ashley?" "Yes." He leaned back slowly. "Okay." I dropped my bag onto the chair. "That is exactly what I said when I saw it. Do you want a different reaction?" "No, I'm trying to copy yours." He closed the laptop. "Tell me." I did. I told him the Sunday contract was separate. I told him Mom and Dad were the billing contacts. I told him the basic room, food, and chairs were theirs. I told him the file listed our upgraded setup as pending carryover. Then I told him about the email address that looked like mine but was not. Nathan's jaw tightened at that. "Nothing got approved from it?" he asked. "No." "Because of the authorization lock?" "Yes." "Good. Very. Do they know who sent it?" "Not officially. Do you?" "No." He studied my face. "You have a guess." "I have several, which is why you don't have an answer." I nodded. He stood and came around the table. "What do you want to do?" "That is the problem." "Why?" "Because if I confront them now, I blow up the weekend before we know who did what. If I don't, I'm getting married knowing there is another wedding sitting on the other side of our reception. That part is already true whether you confront them or not." I hated that. Nathan took my hands. "What is at risk right now? Our trust in my family? Already wounded. Our wedding? Operationally. No. Your money? No, because nothing can be extended without us. Then what are you trying to solve tonight?" I opened my mouth and realized I did not have a clean answer. The truth was, I wanted certainty. I wanted Mom to admit she had planned Sunday after I said no. I wanted Ashley to tell me exactly what she knew. I wanted Dad to explain why he had been speaking as though Ashley needed protection from a situation I had not even confirmed yet. Most of all, I wanted to know whether the fake-looking email meant someone in my family had actually tried to impersonate me. But none of those questions had to be answered that night for me to get married safely. "I don't know," I said. Nathan nodded. "Then maybe you don't solve it tonight." I let out a breath. "That sounds irresponsible." "No. You already protected the contracts. I hate unresolved things." "I know. What if they do something during the reception? Then we deal with what they actually do." "We?" He smiled slightly. "You. I'll stand there and look supportive. That is probably best." He squeezed my hands. "Morgan, listen to me. If your family tries to turn this into something you have to fix during our reception, I need you to remember something." "What?" "You don't have to earn this wedding." I stared at him. He continued before I could deflect. "You paid for it, you planned it, you protected it, but none of that is why you get to enjoy it. You get to enjoy it because you're getting married. You do not have to spend the whole day proving you deserve to keep what's yours." Something in my throat tightened. My family had spent years teaching me the opposite, without ever saying it directly. If I was organized enough, useful enough, flexible enough, patient enough, then I could keep my place without becoming a problem. Nathan made love sound much simpler. "I want one thing from you Saturday," I said. "Anything. If they pull me away from the reception over Sunday, don't let me spend our wedding fixing their problem." He looked at me carefully. "Are you asking me to stop you?" "I'm asking you to remind me." "I can do that, and don't go confront my father." "I wasn't planning to." "You looked like you were planning to." "I was planning it imaginatively." "That still counts." He smiled. "Then I withdraw my imaginary confrontation." For the first time since Priya turned the monitor toward me, I laughed. The next 2 days moved so fast that the Sunday wedding almost became background noise. Almost. Grace sent me written confirmation that our original strike schedule remained active. The florist confirmed the arch would come down after our event, unless I signed an extension. The lighting vendor confirmed the same. The rental company corrected the visible pickup time back to the original window while the hotel audit remained open. Every practical thing I needed protected was protected. The unfinished part was the communication trail. Priya emailed me once to say the hotel was still reviewing a follow-up call related to the unauthorized request and would provide documentation after internal verification. I did not ask for more. I had promised myself I would not turn the final days before my wedding into an investigation. That choice was harder than it sounds. There were moments when all I wanted to do was call Ashley and ask one question after another until she slipped. I wanted to call Dad and read the fake email address aloud. I wanted to tell Mom I knew about the Sunday ceremony just to hear how long it took her to recover. Instead, I did ordinary wedding things. I picked up my dress. I approved the final seating chart. I answered a question about vegetarian meals. I reminded Nathan that his groomsmen still had not sent Grace his arrival time. I confirmed the ceremony rehearsal. I slept badly. The night before the wedding, Mom came to my hotel room while I was finishing a last-minute bag check. Ashley had gone downstairs to meet Ethan's family. Grace was somewhere in the building dealing with deliveries. Nathan and I had agreed not to see each other again until the ceremony, which meant I was alone when Mom knocked. She came in carrying a garment box with my veil. "I thought Grace had that," I said. "She did." I asked if I could bring it up. "Why?" Mom looked almost offended. "Because I'm your mother." For one dangerous second, I wanted to say, "Are you?" I did not. She set the box on the bed and lifted the veil out with both hands. It was cathedral length, but light enough that it seemed almost weightless when she spread it across the blanket. "Try it once," she said. I already had the final fitting. "I know, just humor me." The request was so normal that I let her. I sat in front of the mirror while Mom fastened the comb into my hair. I was not in the wedding hairstyle yet, so it sat a little awkwardly. But when she arranged the fabric over my shoulders, the room changed. For a moment, I could see the version of tomorrow I had been trying so hard to protect. Mom stood behind me. Her hand settled lightly on my shoulders. "You look beautiful," she said. "Not impressive. Not practical. Not expensive. Beautiful." I looked at her reflection. She looked emotional. And because I was still her daughter, because even 38 years of patterns had not killed that part of me completely, I wanted to believe the moment meant something uncomplicated. "Thank you," I said. Mom smiled faintly. "Nathan is lucky. I'm lucky too." "I know." We sat in silence for a few seconds. Then Mom touched the edge of the veil and said, "I know things have been tense." There it was. I kept my eyes on the mirror. "They don't have to be. I wish you could trust that I want both my girls to be happy." "I believe you want that," she heard the qualification. But sometimes you decide what happiness should cost someone else." Mom's hands dropped away from my shoulders. "I'm not doing this tonight," she said. "Neither am I. I came here to have a moment with my daughter. We were having one." She looked at me through the mirror, and for a second, I thought she might actually tell me. The Sunday wedding, the setup, the plan, anything. Instead, she carefully removed the veil. "I hope tomorrow you can just enjoy yourself," she said. "So do I." She laid the veil back in the box. At the door, she stopped. "Tomorrow morning is going to mean a lot to your sister." I turned toward her. The sentence was casual. Too casual. "Tomorrow morning?" Mom's eyes moved to mine. For the first time that evening, her face changed. Only slightly. "Enough." Then she smiled. "I mean this weekend. All of it. She's had such a terrible few weeks." I did not correct her. I did not tell her I had seen the Sunday booking. I did not tell her I knew the room was contracted under her and Dad's names. I did not mention the pending carryover. I simply said, "Good night, Mom." She watched me for another second before leaving. The door closed softly behind her. I stood alone beside the bed and stared at the veil. Mom had just spoken about Sunday, as though she already expected it to happen. Maybe that should have been the moment I confronted her. The old version of me would have. The fixer. The one who believed every problem had to be resolved before she could move on to the next thing. Instead, I picked up my phone and texted Grace. Everything still locked under original Saturday terms? Her reply came less than a minute later. Yes, nothing carries over without you. I looked at the message until my breathing slowed. Then I put the phone on the nightstand. Whatever my family thought Sunday would become, Saturday was still mine. I woke before my alarm on Saturday morning and knew immediately I was not going back to sleep. The hotel room was still dim, the curtains barely outlined by early June light, and for a few seconds I lay there listening to the air conditioner and the soft hum of traffic far below. My first instinct was to reach for my phone. I wanted to check the vendor schedule, confirm the strike order, make sure nobody had slipped a last-minute request through after midnight. My hand was halfway to the nightstand before I stopped myself. I had already checked. Grace had confirmed it the night before. The Saturday contracts were locked, the carryover was not approved, and nothing connected to our event could stay for Sunday without me. If I kept checking the same facts, I was not being careful anymore. I was feeding the part of myself that believed disaster only stayed away if I watched it every second. I still picked up the phone, but I opened Nathan's last message instead of my email. He had sent it just before midnight from another floor of the hotel, where he was staying with two of his groomsmen because we had agreed not to see each other before the ceremony. The message was simple. Sleep. Tomorrow is ours. I smiled despite myself, then put the phone face down and got out of bed. By 8, the room was full of people. Hair and makeup arrived first, then two of my closest friends, then Ashley, then Mom. Coffee appeared. Garment bags appeared. Someone turned on music. For the first time in weeks, the noise around me had nothing to do with suspicious vendors or hidden Sunday plans. It was ordinary wedding noise, and I wanted it. Grace came in shortly after 9 with her tablet tucked against her side. I saw her and immediately felt the old urge to ask for a status report, but she beat me to it. Everything is exactly where it should be, she said quietly while one of my friends was arguing with a curling iron. No changes, no carryover. Original strike schedule is still active. I nodded, and she kept her voice low. The Sunday event remains separate. You do not need to do anything about it today. I looked at her for a moment, then unlocked my phone and handed it to her. Put this in my bag and don't give it back unless Nathan is on fire. Grace raised an eyebrow. Actual fire? I thought about it. Fine. Fire, hospital, or the building being evacuated. She smiled, slipped the phone into my overnight bag, and said, That I can work with. Mom watched the exchange from across the room, but she did not ask what it was about. That surprised me. She was behaving almost carefully, as though some part of her understood that pushing me too early might ruin whatever she thought she had arranged for later. At the time, I did not know that was exactly what was happening. I only knew she was being pleasant. She complimented my hair. She helped one of my friends fasten a bracelet. She did not mention Ashley's dress. She did not mention Sunday. She did not mention the hotel setup once. If I had only that morning to judge her by, I could almost have convinced myself that the last few weeks had been a misunderstanding exaggerated by wedding stress. Ashley was even harder to read. She arrived in a pale blue robe that matched the rest of the getting ready group and carried a box of pastries nobody had asked her to bring. She looked tired but not triumphant, not secretive, not like someone about to steal a wedding out from under me. She sat near the window while her hair was styled and asked me whether I had remembered to eat. When I admitted I had only had coffee, she pushed a pastry across the table and said, "You're going to pass out before the vows, and Mom will make it about herself somehow." I laughed before I could stop myself. For a few minutes, we sounded like sisters instead of people standing on opposite sides of a mystery. That made me feel worse. It would have been easier if Ashley had spent the morning gloating. It would have been easier if she wore white, demanded attention, or said something openly cruel. Instead, she adjusted the clasp on my necklace when my hands were shaking too much to catch it. She told me my dress looked better than it had at the final fitting. She cried when I put on the veil. None of those things erased the questions about Sunday, but they complicated them. I remember looking at her reflection behind me and thinking maybe Nathan had been right from the beginning. Maybe Ashley was benefiting from something she had not built. Maybe I had been so used to blaming the golden child that I had not paid enough attention to the people who kept constructing the pedestal. Dad arrived downstairs before the ceremony and sent word through Grace that he was ready whenever I was. I had not decided until that morning whether I wanted him walking me down the aisle. Nathan had told me months earlier that I could walk alone, with Mom, with both parents, with a friend, or with no one. I had kept Dad because, despite everything, I had wanted the ritual. That is difficult to admit now because people like clean emotional math. They want betrayal to erase affection instantly. It did not. Dad was still the man who had taught me to drive, who had sat through every bad school concert, who used to leave $20 in my college textbooks because he knew I would refuse if he handed it to me. Loving someone does not make their choices less wrong. Sometimes it only makes those choices hurt more. When I met him outside the ballroom corridor, he looked older than he had a week earlier. Maybe that was only the suit and the nerves. He held out his arm and said, "You ready?" I almost asked him what he meant by Sunday. I almost asked whether he had ever seen the fake-looking email address. I almost asked why Mom and Dad were listed as billing contacts for Ashley's ceremony. Instead, I slipped my hand through his arm and said, "For this?" "Yes." He squeezed my hand. "Good." Then he looked at me with what seemed like genuine emotion and added, "You look beautiful, kiddo." For a few steps, I let myself believe that was the only truth in the room that mattered. The ceremony itself is still one of my favorite memories. That is important to me. My family tried very hard to make the wedding about something else, and for a while afterward, I let them. When people asked about that weekend, I told the story of Mom's toast, the second dress, the Sunday wedding, the emails. I almost forgot that before any of that happened, Nathan and I actually got married. The ballroom looked exactly the way we had planned. The arch was covered in greenery and white flowers without looking overloaded. The draping softened the walls. The light through the tall windows was warm enough that Grace later told me the photographer nearly abandoned his original settings because the room changed so beautifully. Nathan was waiting at the end of the aisle. He looked nervous until he saw me. Then his face changed in a way I cannot describe without sounding sentimental. I stopped thinking about contracts. I stopped thinking about Mom. I stopped thinking about the white garment bag sitting somewhere behind a locked hotel door. I only saw him. By the time Dad placed my hand in Nathan's, the rest of the room had gone blurry around the edges. Nathan leaned toward me and whispered, "Still not on fire." I laughed so unexpectedly that the officiant had to wait for me to recover. Nathan looked pleased with himself. Our vows were not elaborate. We had written them ourselves and agreed in advance that neither of us would turn them into performances. Nathan promised that when I started solving a problem before deciding whether it was mine to solve, he would ask me one question first. I promised that when he insisted a home improvement project would take one easy weekend, I would assume 3 weekends and budget accordingly. People laughed. Then we said the parts that mattered. He told me he loved the fact that I was competent, but did not need me to be competent every minute. I had heard versions of that from him before, but standing there in front of everyone, I felt the full weight of it. When it was my turn, I told him I had spent much of my life confusing being needed with being valued. With him, I had learned they were not the same thing. I had not planned that line as a comment about my family. I had written it weeks earlier, but I saw Mom in the front row when I said it, and something flickered across her face. At the time, I thought maybe she understood. Looking back, I think she only recognized herself in a sentence she did not like. We kissed. Everyone stood. The band started playing. Nathan and I walked back up the aisle as husband and wife, and for the next hour I was happier than I had expected to be. That sounds strange, but weddings invite so much anticipation that the actual event can feel like a test you have spent a year studying for. Once the ceremony was over, the test disappeared. Nathan and I were married. The rest was dinner and music. During cocktail hour, Grace caught my eye once from across the room and gave me a tiny thumbs up. I knew what it meant. Everything operational was still secure. I did not go over to her. I did not ask for details. I did not check my phone. That may sound like nothing, but for me, it felt like deciding to leave a door unlocked after years of checking it 3 times. I had done what I could. The rest could wait. Ashley joined us for family photographs and behaved normally. She wore a dark green dress, not white, not cream, not anything remotely bridal. She stood where the photographer told her. She did not demand individual shots. She did not try to push herself next to Nathan. When Mom suggested one extra picture with just the girls, Ashley rolled her eyes at me behind Mom's back and whispered, "She is going to frame this somewhere enormous." I almost smiled. The photographer finished the family shots and moved on. Ashley stayed beside me for a moment. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes. You look like you're waiting for someone to jump out from behind a curtain." "I'm trying not to." She studied me. "Today is good." I looked at her. "Yes, I mean it." "I know." She seemed about to say something else. Then Ethan called her from across the room. She excused herself and walked away. For one reckless moment, I wondered whether she was about to confess the Sunday wedding. I would later learn that she had come close more than once. At the time, I only saw hesitation and filled the silence with my own guesses. The reception began with introductions and our first dance. Nathan stepped on my dress once. I nearly stepped on his shoe twice. We were not elegant, but we were happy. The ballroom changed after sunset. The upgraded lighting warmed the ceiling. The candles reflected off the glassware, and the lounge areas near the dance floor made the room feel less like a hotel ballroom and more like a space we had built for one night. That was exactly why my parents wanted it. I understood that later. They were not trying to steal chairs, because chairs were expensive. They wanted the transformation. They wanted the version of the room Nathan and I had paid people to create. At dinner, I sat beside Nathan and actually ate. I had promised him I would. And after months of menu tastings and negotiations, I refused to become one of those brides who paid for dinner and never tasted it. We talked to friends. We laughed at a story one of Nathan's groomsmen told about him getting locked out of a construction trailer in the rain. I drank half a glass of wine and stopped there because I wanted to remember the night clearly. For almost 30 minutes, I forgot Sunday existed. That is the last completely peaceful stretch of the weekend I remember. I was dancing with Nathan when I noticed Mom near the edge of the room looking at her phone. Nothing unusual about that. Then she looked toward Dad, who was standing near the bar. He checked his watch. Mom said something to him. Dad glanced toward our table and then toward the DJ booth. A few minutes later, Mom spoke briefly to one of the hotel servers, who pointed toward Grace. I saw it and immediately hated myself for noticing. Nathan felt me tense. What? Nothing. That was a terrible lie. I looked at Mom again. She had crossed the room and was now talking to Grace. I think she's arranging something. Nathan followed my gaze. Do you need to know what? The old answer would have been yes. Instead, I said, not yet. He smiled. Look at you. Don't make it weird. I'm proud. That makes it weirder. He spun me badly enough that I laughed. And for another few minutes, I managed to stop watching Mom. Grace approached me during the next song. I stepped off the dance floor before she could say anything. Is there a problem? No. Then why do you have that face? I always have this face. You do not, Grace sighed. Your mother asked where she falls in the toast order. That's it? That's it. Is she scheduled to speak? She and your father were always on the family toast list. I had forgotten that because the toast order was one of the few things I had mostly delegated. Did she ask anything else? No. What about Sunday? Nothing. I nodded. Grace started to leave, then stopped. The garment bag is still in the wardrobe room, by the way. Sunday access has not started. Nobody has requested early release. I looked at her. I didn't ask. I know. I'm telling you because I know you were about to. She was right. Thank you. And your strike schedule is still unchanged. Also thank you. Morgan. Yes? Go dance. I obeyed. Nathan was waiting where I had left him. Everything good? Yes. Actual yes? Actual yes. He took my hand and pulled me back into the crowd. Ashley was nearby with Ethan. They looked happy. Not performatively happy. The ordinary kind. Ethan had one hand at her waist while she leaned toward him to say something over the music. I watched them for a few seconds and felt a complicated mix of irritation and pity. If he knew about Sunday, he was either a much better actor than I had given him credit for, or he genuinely believed everything had been arranged properly. I had not spoken to Ethan about any of it. That was deliberate. He was not my fiancé. He was not on my contracts. I was not going to drag him into a family conflict based on incomplete information. If Ashley was lying to him, that was her responsibility. If he knew and agreed, I would learn that soon enough. During a break between songs, he came over to congratulate Nathan again. "I'm serious," he said. "This turned out incredible." "Thanks," Nathan said. Ethan looked around the ballroom. "The lighting especially. I didn't realize how much difference that stuff makes." My attention sharpened, though I kept my face neutral. Ashley appeared beside him immediately. "Ethan?" "What?" "Come dance." I was talking. "You can talk tomorrow." The word hung there for half a second. Ethan did not react. I did. Ashley saw it. She took his hand and smiled at me too brightly. "Congratulations again." Then she pulled him away. Nathan waited until they were out of earshot. "You caught that?" "Yes." Could mean nothing. "Yes." "Do you believe that?" "No." He nodded. "Still not your job tonight." "I know." And I did know. Knowing was getting easier. Around 9:30, I finally saw Mom talking to Dad near the DJ booth again. This time, Dad was holding a champagne glass he had not been holding before. Mom gestured toward the tables. Dad looked across the room, and our eyes met. He smiled. It was not a guilty smile. That would have been easier. It was the smile of a father at his daughter's wedding. I looked away first. A few minutes later, Grace came to our table. "Family toasts are starting soon," she said. Nathan nodded. "Who's first?" "Best man, then maid of honor, then parents." My maid of honor was my friend Claire, not Ashley. That had been another decision Mom disliked but could not reasonably fight. Claire had known me since college and had been there through every major part of my relationship with Nathan. Ashley had been invited to stand with me, and she had declined months earlier because she said being bridesmaid while planning her own wedding felt overwhelming. At the time, I had accepted that without question. Now I wondered whether Mom had resented losing even that symbolic position for her. The best man's speech was exactly what I expected. Funny, affectionate, slightly inappropriate in one place. Claire's was shorter and nearly made me cry. She talked about the first time she met Nathan and how quickly she noticed I stopped volunteering to solve everyone's problems when he was around. Not because she became less capable, Claire said, but because he was the first person I saw consistently ask whether the problem belonged to her before handing it over. Nathan leaned toward me. "She stole my vow. You stole my entire personality. You weren't using all of it." I laughed. Mom did not. I saw her expression at the next table. Her smile was present, but thin. Dad stood first when their turn came. He said nice things. That was what confused me most. He talked about teaching me to ride a bike. He joked that I had organized my own birthday party when I was 9 because he had put the balloons in the wrong room. He welcomed Nathan. He said he was proud of the woman I had become. Nothing sounded false. Maybe none of it was false. People contain contradictions much more comfortably than stories do. Dad finished to applause and sat down. Mom stood. She picked up her champagne glass. I felt Nathan's fingers close around mine under the table. Mom waited. At first, I thought she was waiting for the applause from Dad's toast to fade. It did. She kept waiting. A server stopped moving near the back wall. Someone at the next table lowered their voice. The band members looked toward her. Conversations faded one by one until nearly every face in the ballroom had turned toward my mother. That was when I understood. She wanted silence, not a tension that happened naturally. Silence she had deliberately collected. Mom smiled at me. Then she looked at Ashley. Her expression softened in a way I had seen hundreds of times. "Before I say anything about Morgan," she began, "I think there's something this family has avoided saying for far too long. I felt Nathan shift beside me. Dad lifted his glass. Ashley went still. Mom looked around the ballroom as if she wanted to make sure no one missed what came next. "Let's be honest," she said. Her sister would have made the better bride. For 1 second, the room did not react. Then a few people laughed. Not because it was funny, because they thought it had to be a joke. I looked at Dad. He nodded. "Everyone knows it," he said. The words landed harder because my father had added his voice to them. Mom's insult could still have been dismissed as one of her cruel little jokes, the kind she delivered with a smile and expected everyone else to excuse, because she called herself honest. Dad's agreement changed the temperature in the room. A few of the nervous laughs died almost immediately. I could feel Nathan's hand tighten around mine beneath the table, but he did not pull me toward him or stand up. He remembered what I had asked of him. If my family tried to make me spend my wedding fixing their problem, he was supposed to remind me that I had a choice. Mom was still standing. She looked pleased with herself for exactly half a second before she realized the laughter had not become applause. "Laura," Aunt Denise said from somewhere behind me, her voice low but audible. "What kind of toast is that?" Mom ignored her. She looked at Ashley instead. "And after everything this poor girl has been through," she continued, "I think she deserves one good thing to come out of this weekend, too." There it was. Not the insult. The pivot. I understood it so clearly that the old memory came back before I could stop it. Ashley at 14, crying in a school restroom. Mom outside the door saying everyone was waiting, as though an audience transformed pressure into obligation. Years later, the target had changed, but the method had not. Everyone is waiting. Everyone is watching. Everyone already knows. Mom had not stood up to humiliate me because she lost control of herself. She had collected an audience on purpose. I looked at Ashley. She was not smiling. Her face had gone almost blank. But her eyes were fixed on Mom with the expression of someone waiting for the next line, in a script she had been told would work. That decided it for me. I turned toward Grace. She was standing near the side wall beside Priya, both of them watching the room with the alert stillness of people who knew a private operational problem had just become public. "Grace." She came closer. "Bring out the other dress." Ashley's head snapped toward Mom. Dad lowered his champagne glass so quickly that some of it spilled over his fingers. The reaction was so immediate that the room caught it before Grace even moved. Mom's face changed first. Not much. Her smile simply disappeared. "Morgan," she said. I did not look at her. Grace glanced at Priya. They exchanged a quick word. Then Grace left through the service door toward the wardrobe corridor. Priya followed for a few steps, spoke to a hotel attendant, and returned to the ballroom. The process took less than 2 minutes, but silence makes time behave strangely. People began whispering. Nathan leaned closer. "You good?" "No." "Want to stop?" I looked at him. He meant it. If I said yes, he would help me get up, leave the table, and let Mom stand there with whatever announcement she had been planning. For a moment, I wanted that. Then I looked at Ashley again. "No," I said. "I want one answer." Nathan nodded. Mom set her glass down. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You are turning a family surprise into a public spectacle." I finally looked at her. "You stood up with a microphone." The room went quiet again. Dad wiped his hand with a napkin. "Morgan, let's not do this." I almost laughed. "Do what?" "Make something ugly out of what was supposed to be positive. You just agreed that my sister would have made a better bride at my wedding." "That isn't what I meant." It was 11 words ago. His mouth tightened. Mom stepped in before he could answer. "Your father meant Ashley has always been more traditional about marriage. More romantic. You know that." "No, I don't know that." "Morgan. And even if I did, that still wouldn't explain why my sister has a wedding dress downstairs waiting for tomorrow." The whispering changed. That was the first time most of the room understood the dress was literal. Mom's eyes flicked toward Ashley. Ashley looked down. Aunt Denise said, "A wedding dress?" Mom raised one hand as if she were calming unreasonable children. "This is exactly why I wanted to explain everything properly." "You are doing a great job so far," Claire said from the table beside me. I looked at her once. She lifted both hands. "Sorry." I almost smiled. Then Grace came back. She was carrying the white garment bag by the hanger hook, still sealed exactly as I had first seen it. The hotel delivery sleeve remained clipped near the zipper. Ashley's name was visible from several feet away. Grace stopped beside Priya rather than bringing it directly to me. That detail mattered. She did not hand me my sister's property. She simply brought an item already under hotel custody into the room after the Sunday event had been publicly raised by the people connected to it. Mom stared at the bag. Dad stared at Grace. Ashley stared at Mom. I stood. Nathan rose with me but stayed half a step behind. I pointed at the tag. "What is that dress doing here?" Ashley looked at me. Nobody else answered for her immediately, which I think was the first moment all night she truly understood she had been placed in the center of something she could not let Mom narrate around. "Ashley," I said, "I'm asking you." Her lips parted. "Tomorrow." The word was quiet. I heard it anyway. "So, you are getting married tomorrow." She looked at Mom. "Not Ethan." "Mom." That was the part I remembered later. Mom stepped forward. "Yes." I turned toward her. She picked up the microphone again, apparently deciding control was still recoverable. "Yes, Ashley and Ethan are getting married tomorrow morning," she said. "It is a small ceremony. Family only. Something intimate after the horrible situation with their original venue. And before anyone turns this into something it isn't, this was meant to be a beautiful surprise." For a second, nobody spoke. Then somebody near the back asked, "A surprise for who?" I did not see who it was. Mom ignored that too. She looked at me. "The whole point was that everyone is already here. The hotel is already decorated. The family is together." It made sense. There it was. The sentence she had been working toward since the first phone call. It made sense. I had heard versions of that logic my whole life. Ashley needs it. Morgan can handle it. Morgan already has it. Why waste it? Mom extended one hand toward the ballroom. "Look around. Everything is beautiful. The flowers will still be fresh tomorrow. The furniture is here. The room is already transformed. Instead of letting all of this disappear overnight, we thought it could give Ashley and Ethan the morning they lost." "Way?" "Not I." I looked at Dad. He did not correct her. Nathan shifted beside me, but still said nothing. I asked, "Who is we?" Mom blinked. "Your father and me." "Did Ashley know?" Ashley finally spoke. "I knew about tomorrow. That wasn't my question." She swallowed. Mom cut in. "Of course she knew she was getting married. I'm asking whether she knew you were planning to use our Saturday setup." Mom's expression hardened. "You keep saying use like somebody is stealing furniture out of your house." "I'm saying use because that is the word for using something." A few people shifted in their seats. I could feel the room starting to divide between people who thought this was a family argument they should not be hearing, and people who realized Mom had chosen the audience herself. Mom held up the microphone again. "Morgan, you have spent weeks acting as though we were trying to take something from you when all we wanted was a few additional hours." I looked at her. "Weeks?" She froze. I heard Nathan inhale quietly beside me. Mom had just admitted more than she intended. Most of the guests did not know about the vendor inquiries. I did. Grace did. Priya did. Mom recovered quickly. "You've been suspicious for weeks." "Because my vendors started getting requests." Dad stood. "Morgan, stop." I looked at him. His face was flushed now, but his voice remained controlled. "This is your wedding. Enjoy it." I was. "Then sit down." The command was quiet enough that I think he thought it sounded paternal instead of insulting. "No." His expression changed. It was a small moment, but I remember it almost as clearly as Mom's toast. Dad was used to my disagreement. He was not used to my refusal continuing after he told me the discussion was over. He glanced at Nathan. Nathan did not move. Dad looked back at me. "You don't need to embarrass your sister over contracts." "I haven't embarrassed Ashley." Mom laughed once. "There's a wedding dress in the middle of the ballroom. Because you announced her wedding in the middle of mine." That ended the argument for several seconds. I looked at Grace. "Can you confirm one thing?" Grace came forward, but Priya stepped beside her before she answered. Priya said, "I can confirm the hotel's operational status if that is what you're asking." "Yes." I turned slightly so the room could hear me without taking Mom's microphone. Are any of my Saturday contracted items approved to carry over into tomorrow's event? Priya answered immediately. No. Mom's head turned sharply. Dad stared at her. Priya continued, her tone professional. The Sunday event has a separate room booking and a basic hotel package. The items associated with Morgan and Nathan's Saturday vendor agreements remain subject to their original strike schedule. No carryover of those assets has been approved. A murmur moved through the room. Mom stepped toward her. That is not what we were told. Priya did not react defensively. I can only speak to the current event records. We were told arrangements had been made. Some carryover inquiries were received. Exactly. Inquiries are not approvals. Mom's mouth tightened. I did not miss the wording. Neither did Nathan. He leaned close enough that only I could hear him. Stay with what you know. I nodded. That was the entire difference between how I handled that moment and how I might have handled it 10 years earlier. I wanted to say somebody had impersonated me. I wanted to say I had seen the strange email address. I wanted to accuse Dad because something about the way he was reacting suddenly felt wrong. But the audit was not complete. So I did not. I looked at Mom. I did not authorize anyone to use my Saturday contracts tomorrow. Mom shook her head slowly, as though I had disappointed her in some fundamental way. You would really make them tear everything down overnight just to prove a point? No. She stared at me. They are tearing it down because that is what Nathan and I paid them to do. That is the same thing. It isn't. You could change it. Yes. The room became quieter. Mom seemed encouraged by the admission. So change it. No. There was no shouting in the room. No dramatic gasp. Just a clean silence. Mom's face went rigid. You have the ability to give your sister something beautiful at almost no cost to yourself, and you are choosing not to because your feelings are hurt. I felt the anger rise then. Not because she called me selfish. Because she had reduced the whole thing to feelings after weeks of people going behind my back to build a plan that depended on my eventual surrender. I wanted to tell every person in that ballroom exactly what she had done. Instead, I asked one question. When did I say yes? Mom stared at me. I'm serious, I continued. When did I agree? You knew we were trying to find a solution. That is not yes. We talked about it. I said no. Dad stepped closer. There were later conversations. With who? He stopped. That was the first time I saw real alarm in his face. Not outrage. Alarm. I filed it away. Mom said quickly, You were stressed. We were trying not to pile more onto you. So you planned it without asking me. We thought once you saw how little it affected you. That isn't consent. I did not say the word dramatically. I did not need to. Priya looked down at her tablet. Grace kept her eyes on Mom. Aunt Denise spoke again. Laura, did Morgan ever actually agree? Mom turned toward her. This is between my daughters. You stood up and told all of us. That line did what nothing I had said had managed to do. Mom looked around the ballroom. For the first time, she seemed to understand that the audience she had collected was no longer automatically hers. A cousin near the back asked, You booked another wedding here tomorrow without telling her? Mom's jaw tightened. We booked a separate event. Using her decorations? Not her decorations. Vendor items that would otherwise be removed. Someone else said, which she paid for. Mom raised her voice. This is not about money. I almost smiled. It became about money when you wanted to use things I paid for. She turned back to me. You see everything as a transaction? No. I see a transaction as a transaction. Dad rubbed one hand across his face. This is getting out of hand. It was out of hand before Mom stood up. Morgan. I turned away from him and looked at Ashley. She had not said anything since admitting the dress was for tomorrow. Ethan stood beside her now. He looked confused in a way that immediately told me something important. Not confused about the wedding. Confused about me. He looked from Ashley to Mom, then to me. Morgan, he said. It was the first time he had spoken. Yes? You knew we were getting married tomorrow? I found out yesterday. His face changed. He looked at Ashley. Yesterday? Ashley's shoulders went rigid. Mom said, Ethan, this is not the time. He ignored her. I thought she knew. Nobody answered him. He looked at me again. Ashley told me you knew. I felt something inside me settle. Not because I was glad, because one more uncertainty had just found a shape. I knew as of yesterday, I said. I never agreed to let tomorrow use our Saturday vendors. Ethan turned slowly toward Ashley. Ash? She looked at him. Then Mom. Again. That second look toward Mom was even more revealing than the first. Ethan saw it too. When did Morgan say yes? He asked. Ashley opened her mouth. Mom stepped toward them. This is not something that needs to be litigated in the middle of a reception. Ethan did not look at her. He asked Ashley again. When? Ashley's face had gone pale. I thought it was handled. That isn't what I asked. Mom said. Laura interrupted sharply. Enough. The room went still again. It was the first time all night Mom sounded afraid. Ashley looked at her. Dad said, We need to take this private. I agreed with him on exactly one thing. Yes, I said, you do. Mom stared at me as if she expected more. A speech. A threat. Some punishment. I had none. I looked at Grace. Please put the dress back where it was. Grace nodded. She took the garment bag by the hook and returned it to the wardrobe corridor. The entire object that had held the room hostage disappeared through the service door in seconds. Then I turned to Priya. Nothing changes on our Saturday contracts. Understood. I looked at Mom and Dad. If you want tomorrow's event, use whatever is actually under your Sunday contract. If you want anything additional, arrange it through your own account. Mom stared at me. You're really doing this? No, you did this. Nathan touched the small of my back. It was not a rescue. It was a reminder. I looked at him. He nodded toward the dance floor. That almost made me laugh. Mom said my name again. I turned back. What? Your sister's wedding is tomorrow. I know. And you're going to dance? The absurdity of the question hit me harder than the insult had. Yes. For the first time that night, I smiled. Not at her. At Nathan. Yes. I'm going to dance at my wedding. I took his hand. Behind us, Mom started saying something to Dad. Ashley was crying quietly now. Though whether from humiliation, fear, or anger, I could not tell. Ethan stood beside her without touching her. I did not stay to interpret it. The band had stopped during the confrontation, and the room was uncertain about what came next. Nathan walked over to the bandleader, said something, and within 30 seconds music started again. Not everyone immediately returned to the floor. That was fine. Claire did first. Then Nathan's best man. Then a few cousins. Slowly, the reception started breathing again. I was still furious. I was still embarrassed. I still knew there was an unanswered question sitting behind everything we had just heard. If I had never approved the carryover, why had the hotel received communications suggesting I had? But I had made Nathan a promise. I would not spend my reception fixing their problem. So I danced. It was not graceful. I cried once in the middle of a song and pretended it was sweat until Claire handed me a napkin and told me I was a terrible liar. I ate cake. I spoke to Nathan's parents. I hugged my college friends. I refused 3 separate attempts from relatives to talk about what just happened. At one point, Aunt Denise approached me and said, "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." I knew what she meant. "Thank you." She looked toward Mom's table. I honestly thought when Laura stood up that she was making a joke. So did half the room. She wanted everyone to know tomorrow was happening before you could object. The sentence caught me. I looked at her. "Why do you say that?" Aunt Denise frowned. "Because she told me last week there was going to be a surprise Sunday and not to make other plans." "Did she tell you what?" "No. She said she wanted to announce it herself because once the family knew, it would all work out." My pulse quickened. That sounded like Mom. It also sounded like motive. But it was still Aunt Denise's interpretation, not proof of what Mom intended. I thanked her and let her go. I did not pull out my phone and add it to the timeline. That would come later. Near midnight, the room finally began thinning. Older relatives left first, then families with children. The band finished its last set. Grace started coordinating the early phases of breakdown in the spaces guests no longer used. I saw Mom once across the ballroom. She did not come near me. Dad did. He waited until Nathan stepped away to speak with one of his friends. You happy now? Dad asked. I looked at him. With what? You made your point. I didn't know my wedding required one. You embarrassed your mother. I almost answered sharply. Instead I said, Dad, if Mom wanted privacy, she should not have announced Ashley's wedding into a microphone after insulting me. She was trying to make the best of a bad situation. No, she was trying to make me agree after everyone was already watching. You don't know that. No, I said. Not yet. That answer bothered him. I saw it. What does that mean? It means exactly what I said. He studied my face. Then he said, You need to let this go before you damage the family over something stupid. I looked at him for a long moment. The fake-looking email address came back to me. So did Priya's mention of a follow-up. I wondered whether Dad knew the audit existed. I did not ask. I'm not doing this tonight, I said. For once, I borrowed Mom's line. Dad walked away angry. Nathan returned a minute later. What did he want? For me to let it go. Convenient. Yes. Are you? No. Nathan smiled faintly. Also convenient. I leaned into him. The adrenaline was finally draining out of me. I don't want to talk to anyone else. Then don't. Can we leave? Soon. We still had a few goodbye rounds to make, but we were almost done when I noticed Ethan and Ashley near the ballroom entrance. They were standing several feet apart. Mom was nowhere near them. Neither was Dad. I could not hear what they were saying. Then Ethan looked over at me. Ashley followed his gaze. Her eyes were red. I almost looked away. Ethan came toward me. Ashley followed slowly. Nathan stayed beside me. Ethan stopped a few feet away. I need to ask you one thing. Okay. He looked uncomfortable. Not angry at me. That mattered. Before yesterday, did you ever tell Ashley you were okay with us using anything from this wedding tomorrow? No. He nodded once, as though he had expected the answer, and hated receiving it. He turned toward Ashley. When exactly did your sister tell you yes? Ashley stared at him. Her face crumpled slightly. She didn't. Ethan's jaw tightened. Ashley looked at Mom's empty table before looking back at him. Mom said she would. For a moment, none of us moved. The ballroom was almost empty now, reduced to half-cleared tables, abandoned water glasses, and the soft mechanical noise of staff beginning to work around the edges of the room. Ethan looked at Ashley as though he were waiting for her to correct the sentence. She did not. Nathan stood beside me with one hand resting lightly against my back, not pushing me forward or pulling me away. I remember noticing that because everything about my family had trained me to expect somebody else to decide when a conversation was over, Nathan never did that. He waited for me to decide what belonged to me. Ethan spoke first. Your mom said Morgan would agree? Ashley wiped under one eye with the side of her finger. She said it was handled. That is not what you just said. Ashley looked down. You said Morgan didn't tell you yes, he continued. You said your mother said she would. I thought Mom had talked to her. You thought, or she told you? Ashley's shoulders tightened. She told me Morgan knew about the plan. I said, I found out yesterday. Ashley flinched. Ethan looked at me. Yesterday as in Friday? Yes. And the wedding was booked before that? Yes. He turned back toward her. How long have you known about Sunday? Ashley hesitated. A few weeks. That answer hurt, even though I had already assumed it. How many? I asked. She looked at me. 3, maybe? You knew there was a wedding here for 3 weeks. I knew Mom and Dad booked the room. And you never told me. Ashley's face hardened slightly. You would have shut it down. No, I couldn't shut it down. It wasn't my booking. You would have made it impossible. How? You would have said no to everything. I already had. She looked away. That was the first time the conversation stopped being about whether Ashley had been deceived and became about what she had chosen to do with the uncertainty. I could see Ethan arriving at the same question from a different direction. When did you think Morgan agreed? He asked. Ashley rubbed her hands together. Mom kept saying she had talked to her. That still isn't an answer. I don't know. You're getting married tomorrow morning and you don't know when the person supposedly giving you thousands of dollars worth of wedding setup said yes? Ashley looked at him sharply. It wasn't thousands of dollars to her. It was already paid for. The sentence came out fast. Too fast. Ethan went still. So did I. Ashley realized what she had said and immediately shook her head. That's not what I meant. It is exactly what you meant, I said. No. I mean, it wasn't like we were asking you to buy it twice. You were asking to use what we paid for after I said no. I didn't know you said no. I held her eyes. Did you know I had never said yes to you? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That was the question that mattered. Not whether Mom had lied. Not whether Dad had made paperwork happen. Whether Ashley herself had ever heard consent from me. Ethan asked more quietly. Did you? Ashley's eyes filled again. No. The word was barely audible. I felt a strange kind of relief. Not because it made anything better, but because the conversation had finally reached something solid. I asked, Did you ever think about asking me? Ashley laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Of course I did. Then why didn't you? She looked toward the hallway where Mom and Dad had disappeared earlier. Because I knew what you'd say. There it was. Not ignorance. Choice. Ethan stepped back from her. Ashley immediately reached for him. Ethan. He did not move far enough to be cruel. He just did not let her touch him. You told me she wanted to help us. Ashley's face collapsed. I thought eventually she would. That is not what you told me. Mom said once everything was settled. You told me Morgan wanted to do this. I didn't know what else to say. You could have told me the truth. Ashley looked at me as if I might somehow make that less devastating. I did not. She swallowed. I almost texted you. Me? Yes. When? Maybe 2 weeks ago. What did you write? Ashley stared at the floor. I waited. Finally, she said. Something like, Did you really say we could use the setup Sunday? And? I deleted it. Before sending? Yes. Why? She wiped at her face again. Because if you said no, then I would know Mom was lying. The honesty of that answer was worse than another excuse. Nathan shifted beside me. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Ashley continued in a rush, as if getting the words out quickly might make them smaller. I had already lost the venue. We didn't know when we were getting the deposit back. Mom said she could fix it. She said everyone was already going to be here, that the hotel had space, that the flowers and everything would just be sitting there anyway. She kept saying you had agreed to let some things stay. I hadn't. I know that now. You knew enough then. Ashley looked at me. I kept my voice level. You knew I had not told you yes. You knew enough to be afraid of asking me. That means some part of you already knew the answer Mom was giving you might not be real. I didn't know what Dad was doing. I didn't say you did. I didn't send any emails. I didn't talk to your vendors. I know. She seemed startled. That was the part I had been working toward for days. I had blamed Ashley too quickly because she benefited. That had been unfair. But correcting that mistake did not require me to pretend she had done nothing wrong. I don't think you built this, I said. I think Mom and Dad did. But you stood inside it because you liked what they were promising. Ashley started crying again. Quieter this time. Ethan looked exhausted. He rubbed one hand across his face. I need space. Ashley turned to him. Please don't do this tonight. He looked at her. You mean the night before our wedding? She flinched. Yes, he said. I'm aware of the timing. It doesn't have to change anything. His expression sharpened. It changes whether I believe you. That shut her up. I wanted to leave. Not because I had stopped caring, but because I could feel the old reflex rising. Ashley was crying. Ethan was angry. The obvious next move in my family had always been for me to stabilize the room, explain what each person meant, give everyone a practical next step, reduce the damage. I took a breath and did nothing. Nathan noticed. He leaned closer. Ready? Yes. We had taken only 2 steps when Mom appeared through the ballroom doors carrying a folder. I almost laughed at the timing. She looked at Ashley first, then Ethan, then me. What happened? Nobody answered. Mom walked closer. Ashley? Ethan said. She told me Morgan never agreed. Mom's gaze snapped to Ashley. Ashley stared back at her. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Mom said, That is not accurate. I turned toward her. Which part? She ignored me. We had conversations. Plans changed. People were coordinating. This whole thing has been made much more complicated than it needed to be, Ethan asked. Did Morgan say yes? Mom looked at him as if he had asked the wrong question. We were working toward a solution. That is also not yes, he said. Mom's jaw tightened. Then she lifted the folder. I'm not doing this in the hallway. I have something that solves the problem. My entire body went cold. Of course she did. Mom always had something that solved the problem, provided everyone agreed that the problem was other people refusing to accommodate her. She walked toward one of the cleared tables and opened the folder. Grace was nearby speaking to a banquet captain. Mom called her over. Grace, can you explain to Morgan that if she approves an extension now, the items can still remain until tomorrow? Grace looked at the paper, then at me. I can explain what would happen if Morgan requested an extension, she said carefully. Good. Explain. Grace did not touch the document. Some vendors are already beginning strike according to the original schedule. Anything not yet removed could potentially be re-quoted for extended use, depending on crew availability and vendor approval. Anything already in teardown may require reset labor. The florist would have to confirm whether installations can remain stable. The rental company would need a formal extension. The lighting crew would need overtime or a revised service window. Mom waved one hand. But it can be done. Parts of it may be possible. Mom looked at me. There. Done. No. She stared. I had not even looked at the document closely yet. Morgan read it. I don't need to. You don't even know what you're refusing. Yes, I do. It is an authorization for the vendors to leave selected items through Sunday afternoon. Your father and I will cover the additional charges. I looked at the folder. The document was cleanly formatted. Hotel letterhead. Saturday event reference. Sunday event reference. A line authorizing specified Saturday installations to remain available for Sunday use. Signature line for me. The timestamp on the printout was after the reception. That mattered. This was not proof of what had happened before. It was proof that, even now, my parents knew they needed permission they did not have. Mom pushed a pen toward me. Nobody needs to know this got complicated, she said. I looked at her. She lowered her voice as though the privacy itself were a gift. We can fix it. You sign. We pay the extension. Tomorrow happens. I will apologize for the toast, publicly, if that's what you need. What exactly are you apologizing for? Mom's lips pressed together. For saying something that upset you. That isn't an apology. Fine. For saying Ashley would have made the better bride. And everything else? What everything else? I almost admired the discipline. The weeks of vendor requests after I said no. We were trying to establish what was possible. The Sunday wedding booked without telling me. We didn't need your permission to book it. You're right. That answer threw her. I continued. You never needed my permission to book Sunday. You needed my permission for this. I tapped the authorization. Yes, she said impatiently. Which is why I am asking now. After you already told 60 people tomorrow was happening. 160 people heard you humiliate me tonight, Mom. Her face tightened. You keep making that the focus. You made it the opening line. Dad came through the doors then. He looked from the folder to me and seemed to understand immediately what was happening. Just sign it, he said. Nathan's hand dropped from my back. Not because he was leaving, because he knew I did not need the reminder anymore. I looked at Dad. No, he exhaled sharply. Morgan, I said no. Your mother just told you we'll pay the additional cost. That's not the issue. What is the issue? You're asking me to sign something now so everyone can pretend I agreed before. No one is asking you to lie. That is exactly what this does socially, even if the timestamp is honest. Tomorrow happens in the room I paid to transform, and everyone goes home thinking this was some complicated family plan I eventually approved. Dad looked irritated. Who cares what people think? I almost laughed. Mom cared enough to announce it in front of everyone. Mom folded her arms. You want to punish us? No. Then sign it. No. You are proving my point. What point? That this was never about the money. It is about control. I looked at the paper again. Maybe a year earlier, that accusation would have hooked me. Maybe I would have signed just to prove I was generous. Maybe I would have spent the next month furious at myself and telling everyone it was fine because I had technically agreed in the end. That was how the system worked. They pushed. I resisted. They made my resistance evidence of selfishness. Then I gave in to prove I was not selfish. Afterward, everyone remembered only that I had said yes. I slid the paper back toward Mom. I'm not turning what you did into something I agreed to. Her expression changed. For once, there was no immediate response. Dad said, "Nothing was done to you." I looked at him. "Then why do you need my signature?" He stopped. That was answer enough. Grace spoke gently. "Laura, Mark, if Morgan is not authorizing carryover, we need to proceed under the existing schedules. If you want replacement items for Sunday, Priya can have the events team price what is still feasible." Mom turned on her. "Replacement items?" "Yes. The room is already set. For tonight. It will be empty by morning." "Not empty," Grace said. "Your Sunday contract includes basic chairs, tables, catering setup, and standard room elements. What will be removed are the upgraded vendor items contracted for Morgan and Nathan's event." Mom stared at her. The reality seemed to reach her in pieces. The arch? Scheduled for strike. The draping? Saturday contract. The lighting? Saturday contract. The lounge furniture? Saturday rental. The large flowers? Florist strike begins overnight. Mom looked at me. I could see the calculation happening in her face, even if I could not know the exact numbers in her head. "You would let them dismantle all of that when Ashley is getting married in a few hours?" "Yes." Her eyes widened. Not because my answer was cruel, because I had answered without defending myself. Dad stepped closer. "Morgan, be reasonable." "I am. Those crews are already here. The equipment is already here. It makes no sense to tear it down and bring something else back. That's a conversation for your Sunday vendors." "You know what I mean." "Yes. You mean it is cheaper if I change my answer." Dad's mouth tightened. I continued. "I gave that answer 6 weeks ago." Mom's voice rose. "And everyone is supposed to suffer because you refuse to reconsider?" "Who is everyone?" "Ashley, Ethan, your father and me, the guests coming back tomorrow. Ethan is standing 10 feet away deciding whether he even wants the ceremony to happen." Mom turned. Ethan had been silent for several minutes. He looked at her now. "Do not put me in that sentence," he said. Mom blinked. "This is between you and Ashley." "No, you planned my wedding too. We saved it. You planned it around something Morgan never agreed to. I was told she would." "By who?" The question hung there. Mom looked at Dad. It was fast. A fraction of a second. But I saw it. Dad immediately said, "This is not the time." Ethan gave a short, bitter laugh. "Seems like the time." Ashley stood near the ballroom doors with her arms folded tightly around herself. I looked at her. She was watching Dad now. Not Mom. That was new. Grace's radio crackled at her waist. She listened, answered quietly, then looked at Mom. "The florist needs a decision within 20 minutes if you want a quote for a simplified replacement arch tomorrow. They cannot leave Morgan's installation without her approval, and once they begin dismantling it, resetting the same piece is not guaranteed." Mom's face lost color. "What about the rentals?" "Priya is checking availability. A rush Sunday package will cost more than a standard booking because of the turnaround." "How much more?" "I don't have the full estimate yet." Dad looked at me again. "You know we can't rebuild an entire wedding overnight." "You don't have to." Mom stared at me as if I had said something monstrous. I pointed toward Grace. "Your Sunday contract already has a room, chairs, tables, and food. Ashley can get married with those." After seeing this, Mom gestured at the ballroom around us. "You think she should walk into a bare room? It won't be bare. You know what I mean." "Yes. For once." I did. She did not want Ashley to have a wedding. She wanted Ashley to have a version that looked comparable to mine. That was the part she could not admit. Ashley spoke from behind her. "Mom." Laura turned. Ashley's voice was shaky. "How much did you think Morgan was paying for tomorrow?" Mom frowned. "She wasn't paying anything extra." Ashley looked at me. I said nothing. Ashley asked, But we were using things she already paid for. Mom's face hardened. Do not let your sister twist this. I'm not twisting anything. This is what she does. She takes one complicated situation and turns it into a moral trial. Ashley looked at the document on the table. You told me it was handled. It was. No, it wasn't. Mom's expression sharpened. Ashley. Not now. For years, those 2 words had probably been enough. Not now. Not here. Don't upset Mom. Let Morgan handle it. Ashley looked at Ethan. He did not rescue her either. She took a breath. I think Ethan and I need to talk. Mom immediately said. After we solve tomorrow? Ethan answered. Before. Mom turned toward him. You are both emotional. I am actually very clear right now. Dad muttered something under his breath and walked a few steps away. I felt tired all at once. The ballroom no longer felt like my reception. Staff were clearing tables. The candles were burning low. The flowers still looked beautiful, but I could see the invisible clock on all of them now. Crew schedules, strike windows, overtime. Everything Mom had treated as something that would simply remain because it was convenient. Nathan leaned toward me. We can go. I nodded. Mom heard him. Morgan, you cannot leave. I almost smiled. I can. We need decisions. You have mine. What are we supposed to do? There was a time when that question would have activated me instantly. What are we supposed to do? It sounded like responsibility being handed across a table. I looked at Mom. You book what you can afford under your Sunday account. And if we can't afford all of it, then you don't have all of it. She stared. Dad turned back. That's your answer? Yes. Grace's radio crackled again. She listened, then said, Priya has preliminary availability for basic replacements. She'll meet you in the lobby in 10 minutes if you want to review it. Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at the folder. Then at me. For the first time that night, neither of them had anything to hand me except the consequences. Nathan and I walked toward the elevators. We were almost at the doors when I heard Mom behind us. How much of this can we put back on Morgan? I stopped. Not because I was going to turn around, because I wanted to be certain I had heard correctly. Dad answered too quietly for me to make out every word. Grace did not. None of it, she said. I pressed the elevator button. Then I took Nathan's hand and left them downstairs with the bill. By the time Nathan and I sat down for breakfast Sunday morning, I had been married for less than 12 hours and had already decided I was not going downstairs to watch my parents discover what their choices cost. The hotel restaurant was quiet, mostly business travelers and a few wedding guests who had not yet checked out. I could have walked 30 yards down another corridor and seen the teardown begin. I did not. Grace had confirmed the original strike schedule before we went upstairs the night before, and that was enough. I did not need to stand beside the arch while someone unfastened the flowers. I did not need to watch Mom argue over linens or Dad calculate overtime. For once, I wanted to let something happen without being the person managing how everyone felt about it. Nathan ordered coffee. I ordered actual food, because he gave me the look that meant he remembered how little I had eaten after the reception exploded. You're not going down there? He asked. No. Good. I might regret not seeing Mom's face. You probably won't. You're no fun. I married you less than a day ago. I'm still trying to make a good impression. I smiled, then looked toward the lobby entrance anyway. Every time someone came through, some part of me expected Mom to appear. She did not. My phone stayed face down beside my plate until Grace texted at 8:15. Strike is proceeding under original schedule. Sunday basic room setup remains intact. I read it once and put the phone away. That distinction mattered enough that I repeated it to myself. My parents were not being thrown into an empty warehouse. Their Sunday contract still gave them a ballroom, standard chairs, tables, basic linens, catering, and hotel staff. What disappeared were the premium things they had counted on borrowing from us. The floral arch, upgraded draping, warm architectural lighting, lounge furniture, premium linens, decorative stands, and the large installations that had transformed a hotel ballroom into the room Mom had admired the night before. Later, Grace told me the teardown started quietly. The florist began with the larger arrangements near the ceremony structure. The lighting crew shut down the upgraded fixtures. Rental staff removed the lounge groupings and rolled the premium linens into inventory carts. Nobody made a spectacle of it because, from their perspective, this was ordinary work. A contract had ended. Mom apparently disagreed. Grace told me later that she arrived in the ballroom just after 8 and demanded to know why the arch was already coming down. Grace reminded her there was no approved extension. Mom argued that she and Dad were prepared to pay. Grace explained that paying did not automatically make Saturday inventory available. Vendors had their own schedules, crews, and commitments. If Laura wanted substitutes for Sunday, Priya had already prepared the emergency options they had discussed after midnight. What about the same arch? Mom asked. The florist had already started dismantling it. What about the flowers? Some could not be transferred in a way the florist would warranty, and others were part of Morgan and Nathan's contracted design. What about the lights? The Saturday crew had already begun their strike. According to Grace, Mom eventually stopped asking why things were leaving and started asking what could be brought back. That was the first time the economics became real. The hotel could provide standard room lighting. A local rental partner had a simplified freestanding arch available for rush delivery. Basic upgraded linens could be found for some tables. Not all. The florist could create a limited arrangement from available inventory, but not reproduce ours. Extra labor would cost more, because everything was happening on Sunday morning with almost no notice. My parents had spent weeks trying to avoid paying for a second full setup by using ours. Now, every saved dollar was turning into a rush charge. I did not know the exact total that morning. I only knew Mom called before I finished breakfast. I stared at her name on my phone until Nathan said, "You don't have to answer." I know. That was why I did. "Good morning," I said. "Do you have any idea what is happening downstairs?" "Yes. They are tearing apart the ballroom. They're striking our Saturday rentals. You can still stop this." "No. Morgan, the ceremony is in less than 2 hours. Then I suggest you work with Priya." Her voice rose. "You think this is funny?" "No. Your sister is upstairs crying while people carry her wedding out the back door. That isn't her wedding." There was silence. I continued before Mom could turn the sentence into something else. "Your Sunday booking still exists. The room is yours. The chairs are yours. The food is yours. The things leaving are what Nathan and I contracted for Saturday. You are splitting hairs." "No. I'm splitting contracts. I knew you would do this." That almost made me laugh. "You knew I would keep the answer I gave 6 weeks ago? You knew how much this meant to her, and you knew I said no." Mom's breathing changed. Then she went for the thing she always went for when facts stopped helping her. "We cannot afford all these emergency charges." I looked at Nathan. He did not say anything. I asked, "How much did you approve?" "That is not the point." "It sounds like exactly the point. Your father and I are already paying for the ballroom, breakfast, the officiant, everything else. We did not expect to have to recreate decorations that were already sitting there." "You mean decorations I paid for? You are determined to make this ugly." "No, I'm determined not to pay for Sunday." "Nobody asked you to write a check. You asked me to leave my paid contracts in place so you wouldn't have to replace them. That is the same financial benefit." She went quiet again. Then she said, "Ashley will never forgive you for this." I felt the old pressure behind that sentence. Maybe she won't. Maybe the family will blame you. Maybe everyone will remember. For the first time, none of it moved me. If Ashley wants to be angry with me, she can call me herself. Mom hung up. Nathan poured more coffee into his cup. "You okay?" "Yes." "Actual yes?" I thought about it. "I'm getting there." We left the restaurant 40 minutes later and started packing our things. I had just zipped my suitcase when Ethan called. That surprised me more than Mom's call had. I answered. "Hey." His voice sounded exhausted. "Morgan, I wanted you to hear this from me before someone else turns it into something." I sat on the edge of the bed. "What happened?" "I postponed the ceremony." I looked at Nathan. He saw my face and stopped packing. "Postponed?" I asked. "Yes." "I'm sorry." "Don't be." I'm not happy about it. I know. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, the room could have worked. That mattered. He was not calling because the decorations disappeared. The hotel found enough replacement stuff, he continued. It wasn't going to look like last night, but we could have gotten married. So why didn't you? Because I asked Ashley one question this morning and I didn't like the answer. What question? I asked her whether she had told me you wanted to help because she believed it, or because she needed me to believe it. I closed my eyes. What did she say? She said both. I did not respond, Ethan continued. She knew you had never said it to her directly. She said your mom kept telling her everything would be fine once the weekend started, and she chose not to question it. That's what she told me last night. I know. There was no anger in his voice toward me, mostly disappointment. I'm not ending things today, he said. But I'm not starting a marriage today either. That sounds reasonable. I told her if we do this later, we pay for it ourselves. No parents running the plan. No promises from somebody else's account. No, Mom said. I felt a strange ache for him. You don't have to explain any of this to me. I know. I wanted you to know I'm not blaming you. Thank you. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry I believed you had agreed without ever thanking you directly. That was such a decent sentence that it hurt. You were told I had. I still should have asked. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a while. Nathan came over. Ethan postponed it? Yes. Because of the lie? Yes. Not the room? The room would have worked. Nathan nodded slowly. That matters. It did. My parents would spend the next several days telling people I destroyed Ashley's wedding by refusing to leave flowers in place. But the ceremony had not been canceled because the room was ugly. It had been postponed because Ethan no longer trusted the story he had been given. That consequence belonged to Ashley and my parents, not me. We checked out around 11. By then, most of the Saturday guests were gone. I saw none of my immediate family in the lobby. Nathan's parents hugged us, told us they were proud of how we handled the night, and then wisely did not ask for details. We were halfway to the parking garage when Dad called. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I answered. Hi, Dad. His voice was lower than Mom's had been. Your mother is beside herself. I assumed. Ashley's ceremony is off. Ethan called me. Dad exhaled sharply. Of course he did. What does that mean? It means everyone is talking to everyone except each other. I talked directly to everyone who asked me a direct question. That is not what I meant. I waited. Dad lowered his voice. Your mother pushed this too far. I stopped walking. Nathan looked back at me. Dad continued. I told her the announcement was a bad idea. Interesting. Not the Sunday wedding. Not the vendor requests. The announcement. So you knew about it. Of course I knew there was a Sunday ceremony. You were the billing contact. I'm talking about the toast. I know. She got emotional. She waited until the whole room was quiet. That doesn't mean it was planned to hurt you. I didn't say it was. Dad paused. Then he said, You know your mother. Once she thinks something is fair, she can get carried away. There was the handoff. Mom's idea. Mom's pressure. Mom's mistake. Dad, once again, just happened to be standing nearby. I looked at Nathan and shook my head slightly, so he knew I was fine. Dad, I said. What exactly did you do? He went quiet. What do you mean? With Sunday. I helped pay for it. What else? Your mother handled most of the planning. That wasn't my question. Morgan, I am not doing one of your interrogations. Then don't. He sounded relieved for half a second. I continued. The hotel is auditing a request that was sent after I locked authorization. If your name is nowhere in it, then you have nothing to worry about. Silence. Long enough that I stopped walking again. Dad's voice changed. What request? I felt something cold settle into place. You don't know? No. That answer came too fast. I had spent enough time negotiating with vendors to recognize when someone answered the safest version of a question instead of the actual one. I'll let the hotel finish its review, I said. Morgan. Yes? Do not turn this into something legal. I didn't say anything about legal. Another silence. That one mattered even more. I have to go, I said. Morgan, listen to me. I ended the call. Nathan opened the passenger door for me. What happened? Dad just told me Mom pushed everything too far. Convenient. Then he asked me not to turn the hotel audit into something legal. Nathan's expression hardened. Did you mention legal? No. He looked toward the hotel behind us. You think he knows what they're going to find? I think he knows enough to be nervous. We drove home. The audit email arrived that afternoon. Priya's message was short. The hotel had completed the initial review of communications connected to the attempted Sunday carryover. She attached a PDF containing the relevant email chain and call notes. I opened it at our kitchen table. The first request after my authorization lock came from the address that looked like mine but was not mine. It asked the hotel to allow selected Saturday installations to remain through Sunday because family arrangements had been finalized. The coordinator replied that the request could not be processed because it did not come from an authorized contact. 2 hours later, another email arrived. The wording had changed. It said I was overwhelmed with wedding week responsibilities and had asked a family representative to handle the Sunday extension on my behalf. The coordinator asked for verification. The next entry was not an email. It was a call note. Caller, Mark Ellis. My father. The note said he identified himself as the bride's father and stated that he was coordinating at Morgan's request because I was busy with final wedding preparations. The hotel still had not approved the carryover because the call did not satisfy the authorization rule. But Dad had tried. Not once. Not accidentally. He had taken a failed request, changed the explanation, and followed it with a phone call. I read the timestamps again. Then I thought about him telling me that morning that Mom had pushed things too far. He had not been standing beside her trying to keep the peace. Mom had the idea. Dad had made it real. I did not call Dad that afternoon. I wanted to. I wanted to hear him explain why his name appeared in the hotel's call notes after he had spent the morning talking as if Mom had simply gone too far and he had been dragged along behind her. I wanted to ask why he had let me spend weeks wondering whether Ashley was the one arranging things behind my back when he knew exactly how the hotel had been pushed to keep trying. But the email chain had already given me something more useful than a confession. It gave me sequence. The first request was rejected because it did not come from an authorized address. The explanation changed. Then Dad called the hotel and said he was acting at my request because I was too overwhelmed with wedding preparations to handle the Sunday extension myself. That was not one bad judgment made under pressure. It was a series of decisions, and once I saw them in order, I stopped needing him to tell me what they meant. Nathan read the entire PDF beside me at our kitchen table. When he finished, he closed the laptop and asked, "What do you want to do?" I told him I wanted Dad to stop hiding behind Mom. Nathan nodded and said, "Then don't argue with the version he tells you. Show him the one he created." I waited until Monday before inviting Dad over. I did not want Mom there because I wanted to hear what he would say when there was no one beside him to absorb the blame. He arrived looking tired but composed, like a man expecting a difficult conversation he still believed he could manage. Then he saw the printed email chain laid out across my dining table, and that expression changed. "You printed all this?" he asked. "You wrote part of it. I did not write those emails. You participated in the request." He sat down. I slid the first page toward him and pointed to the hotel coordinator's response. This request was rejected because it did not come from an authorized contact. 2 hours later, another message said I was overwhelmed and had asked a family representative to handle the extension for me. Then the hotel asked for verification. After that, someone called. Dad rubbed one hand across his mouth. The caller identified himself as Mark Ellis. I continued. He told them he was coordinating at my request. "Morgan, I was trying to help. You told them I asked you to do something I had already told you not to do. That is not how I saw it. How did you see it?" He leaned back and stared at the pages instead of me. "Your mother was trying to save Ashley's wedding. Ashley had already lost the venue and part of the deposit. Ethan thought things were handled. You were stressed. I honestly thought if the logistics were settled first, you would realize leaving a few things in place did not really cost you anything." I almost admired the efficiency of the justification. It contained every belief that had kept our family operating the same way for years. Ashley's disappointment was urgent. Mom's solution was reasonable because she meant well. My resistance was temporary because I was emotional. And Dad's job was to get the machinery moving until I became practical enough to agree. So you thought you could create a situation where saying no became harder than saying yes? No, that is exactly what happened. I never wanted to force you. You represented yourself as acting for me after I had explicitly told the hotel no family member had authority. Dad looked up sharply. I did not pretend to be you. You used an address designed to look close enough to mine that someone might assume it belonged to me. His silence lasted too long. I nodded. That is what I thought. He rubbed his forehead. Your mother had already told people Sunday was happening. Not me. She thought you would come around. And when I didn't? Dad exhaled. I was trying to stop everything from blowing up. That was the sentence I had been waiting for. Because it was the sentence he had used my entire life, even when the words were different. Keep the peace. Don't make this bigger. Your mother is upset. Your sister is sensitive. You can handle it. You kept the family together by deciding I was the one person you could disappoint safely. That is not fair. No. Fair would have been telling Mom no when I did. You know how she gets when Ashley is hurting. I know how you get, too. He looked at me. You decide the strongest person can absorb the damage because they are less likely to make everyone else uncomfortable. That is not how I think. It is how you act. Dad stared at the papers for several seconds. I never wanted to hurt you. I believe that. I watched relief appear in his face and disappear when I continued. You just decided hurting me was cheaper than disappointing them. He did not apologize in a way that mattered that day. He said he regretted how far things had gone. He said he should not have claimed I asked him to handle the extension. He said he should have made Mom tell me sooner. But even then, he described the situation as something that had somehow escaped everyone's control, rather than something he had actively helped build. I stopped trying to make him understand. The documents already did. 3 days later, Ashley asked if she could come over. She arrived alone, carrying her phone in one hand and looking as though she had slept very little. Ethan was still talking to her, but they were not pretending everything was fine. Mom had apparently called her every day since Sunday, alternating between crying and insisting that Morgan had turned a misunderstanding into a family crisis. Ashley sat across from me at the same dining table where Dad had been and unlocked her phone. I went through the planning messages, she said, with Mom and Dad, but mostly Mom. She opened a thread and pushed the phone toward me. The first message that mattered was several weeks old. Don't mention tomorrow to Morgan yet. I want to announce it myself. I scrolled. A relative in the thread had asked what would happen if I refused once I found out. Mom's answer was even shorter. Once everyone knows, she won't embarrass herself by saying no. I read it twice. I had already understood what the toast was designed to do. I knew the moment Mom stood waiting for the ballroom to quiet that she wanted an audience, not just attention. But seeing the intention written down before the wedding destroyed the last possible excuse. She had known I had not agreed. She had expected resistance. The guests were not incidental to her plan. They were the pressure mechanism. Ashley took the phone back and scrolled farther. This one is mine. She handed it back. Did Morgan actually say yes? Mom had replied, she will. Ashley's next message said, okay. I don't want to ask her and start something. I looked at her. She started crying before I spoke. I know. No, I said. You know now. Ashley looked down. You knew then that I had not said yes. I wanted to believe Mom had it handled. You wanted her answer because it gave you the wedding. She flinched but did not argue. I didn't know Dad was doing the email thing, she said. I swear, I didn't know he called the hotel. I believe you. Her face softened with relief. But that does not make you innocent. The relief vanished. You did not impersonate me. You did not contact my vendors. But you knew enough to realize something was wrong. You were afraid to ask me because you thought I would tell you the truth. Ashley wiped her face with both hands. Yes, You accepted the benefit of something because asking the person who actually owned the decision might have cost you what you wanted. Yes, that answer mattered more than any dramatic apology could have. For once, she did not add, but Mom said, or Dad handled it, or after everything I had been through. She let the admission stand by itself. Ethan said, if we ever get married, Mom and Dad are not paying for it, she told me. That sounds reasonable. He said they do not talk to vendors. They do not hold deposits. They do not plan anything. Also reasonable. Ashley gave a weak laugh. Everyone keeps using that word. Maybe because you grew up around people who treated reasonable as whatever hurt you least. She looked down at the phone for a long time before saying, I think Mom liked me needing her. I did not answer immediately. She kept saying she was helping because I deserved something good, Ashley continued. But every time I tried to solve something myself, she would take over. When the venue closed, I was panicking, and she stepped in before Ethan and I even had time to figure out another plan. I thought that meant she believed in me. Now I think she needed me to believe I couldn't do it without her. That was the first time I saw Ashley's separate love from rescue. It did not erase what she had done, but it made me believe she might eventually stop repeating it. The financial consequences took longer to settle because real consequences usually do. There was no instant lawsuit, no police officer showing up at anyone's house, no judge dramatically ordering my parents to pay me. The hotel and vendors simply closed the accounts according to the contracts and the orders that had actually been authorized. Mom and Dad remained responsible for their Sunday room booking. They also owed the rush charges they had approved after I refused to sign the retroactive extension. Simplified rentals, limited replacement florals, extra labor, setup fees, cancellation charges, and portions of the Sunday package that could not be recovered after Ethan postponed the ceremony. The additional cost came to a little over $30,000. Mom called as soon as the numbers became clear. This is ridiculous. It sounds expensive. That is not what I mean. I know. Your father and I are having to cancel Italy. They had been planning a 3-week trip the following spring. I'm sorry. She heard sympathy and mistook it for movement. So you understand why we are asking you to cover part of it. No, Morgan, it is not my bill. The entire mess involved your wedding. My wedding bills are already paid. You know what I mean. Yes. You planned another event around things you expected me to surrender, so you would not have to pay for them yourselves. We were not asking you to write us a $30,000 check. No, you were trying to receive $30,000 worth of benefit without calling it money. Mom went quiet. Then she said, You have always cared more about being right than being kind. That accusation used to work because I would immediately start proving I was kind. I would offer a compromise. I would absorb part of the problem. I would do something generous enough that nobody could continue accusing me. This time I said, I am not paying $30,000 to prove I am a good person. She hung up. Dad tried once too. His argument was softer. He told me they would have to postpone the kitchen renovation they had been discussing for 2 years and take money from savings they had not intended to touch. I understand why that is frustrating, I said. Then help us. No, he sighed. You really have changed. Yes. I did not say it like an insult. As part of closing the disputed account, Priya required Dad to provide a written clarification that I had not authorized the Sunday carryover, and that he had not had authority to amend my Saturday contracts. She told him that if he refused, the hotel would keep the account disputed and could send the matter for legal review. Dad signed. There was no dramatic admission, just his name under a statement he could no longer talk around. Mom hated that letter more than the bill. The bill could be blamed on vendors, rush fees, bad timing, Ethan postponing the ceremony. The letter could not. For several weeks, Mom still told relatives I had changed my mind at the last minute. I never posted screenshots or sent a mass family email. I did not need to. Aunt Denise saw the planning thread. 2 other relatives did too. Quietly, the story began correcting itself. The same audience Mom had tried to use against me eventually understood why they had been invited into the pressure campaign in the first place. The more important change happened with Ashley. She left the family phone plan first. Then she asked Mom to return the spare key to her apartment. Then she moved a small savings account. Dad had helped her open years earlier into a different bank. None of those things looked dramatic from the outside. Mom reacted as though Ashley were disappearing. "You don't need to do this," Mom told her. Ashley later told me her answer. "That is the problem. You trained me to think I needed you to do everything." Mom blamed me for that too. I did not defend myself. By the end of summer, my own contact with my parents had shrunk to occasional family events and short phone calls. Dad kept asking when I planned to put everything behind us. Mom tried once to apologize. She came to my apartment alone and sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa. "I never meant for you to feel unloved," she said. I believed she meant it. It still was not the apology I needed. "You keep apologizing for how I felt. What do you want me to say? That you knew I had not agreed." Mom looked away. "That you knew I might refuse." Her jaw tightened. "That you planned to announce everything in front of 160 people because you thought I would be too embarrassed to say no. Morgan, I was trying to save your sister's wedding." "I know. You say that like it makes me some kind of monster." "No. I say it because it tells me what you valued more." She stood up. "So that is it? You are just walking away from your family?" "No." She stopped near the door. "I am walking away from the job you gave me in it." Mom stared at me. "I am not your backup plan anymore. I am not Ashley's emergency solution. I am not Dad's easiest person to disappoint. And I am not the person who makes every bad decision survivable after the rest of you make it." Mom opened the door. "You will regret shutting people out." Maybe. But even then I knew I was not shutting out people. I was refusing a role. Ashley and I did not become close immediately. That was important. An apology did not restore trust on contact. For months, we texted occasionally and spoke at family events without pretending nothing had happened. She stopped calling me whenever she had a problem. I stopped jumping in with solutions before she asked. At first, the silence between us felt uncomfortable. Eventually, some of it started feeling peaceful. In the spring, she asked me to meet for coffee. She arrived before I did. That alone made me smile, because Ashley had spent most of her adult life assuming somebody would wait for her. "I have been thinking about what I knew," she said after we sat down. I waited. "I did not know Dad was pretending to speak for you. I did not know about the email. I did not know he called the hotel. But I knew you had never told me yes." "Yes." And I liked Mom's answer better. She did not cry. She did not explain. "I am sorry. I believe you. Do you forgive me?" A year earlier, I would have said yes because I hated leaving emotional conversations unfinished. This time I said, "I can forgive you without trusting you yet." Ashley nodded slowly. "That is fair." It was one of the first times I heard her use that word correctly. She and Ethan got married earlier this summer, almost a year after the Sunday ceremony that never happened. They paid for it themselves. About 70 people came. The venue was smaller, the flowers were simple, and there was no expensive lighting package or attempt to make the room look like mine. They had a budget they could actually afford, and when something cost too much, they chose something else instead of deciding another person should absorb the difference. Mom was invited, but Ashley hired her own planner and gave Mom no authority over vendors. Dad attended too. Neither of them gave a toast. I was not maid of honor. I was a guest. That mattered more than I expected. I wore navy, sat beside Nathan, ate dinner, and did not check a single timeline, contract, delivery window, or vendor schedule. Then the music changed. Ashley appeared at the end of the aisle. I recognized the dress immediately. The same white dress that had hung sealed inside the hotel wardrobe room with her name on the tag. The dress I had once stared at through glass while trying not to turn suspicion into certainty. The dress Grace later carried into my reception, after Mom told 160 people my sister would have made the better bride. For almost a year, I had remembered that garment bag as proof that someone was preparing to take something from me. Now Ashley was wearing the dress in a wedding she and Ethan had chosen, planned, and paid for themselves. The dress had not changed. The conditions around it had. So had she. So had I. Nathan reached for my hand. "You okay?" he whispered. I watched my sister walk toward Ethan, the man who had been willing to postpone a wedding rather than begin a marriage inside a lie. Yes. Nathan smiled. Actual yes? Actual yes. I am telling this story now, a few weeks after their wedding. And the strangest thing is that the moment I remember most clearly is not Mom raising her glass. It is not Dad's name in the hotel call notes. It is not even the white garment bag appearing in the ballroom. It is breakfast the morning after my wedding. Nathan and I sat upstairs eating while other people finally had to solve the problem they had created. For the first time in my life, someone in my family asked, "What are we supposed to do?" And I did not mistake the question for an assignment. For years, being the capable daughter meant everyone assumed I could carry more. More disappointment. More responsibility. More compromise. More consequences that belonged to somebody else. They were right about one thing. I was capable. I was capable of putting it down. When family uses your strength as permission to cross your boundaries, do not reward the behavior by fixing the consequences for them. Say no clearly. Protect what is yours. And let adults pay for their own choices. If this story taught you something useful, subscribe for more family drama stories.